Chapter 394. Looking at the numbers, Zhongsho was still a little unsatisfied. After a short while, he finally decided to add a few more strokes. Forget it. It was better to be more generous. This number should be just right. It wouldn't scare people away and wouldn't be easy to achieve. Tricking people to be willing to be your coolie was also a skill. He held onto the sword, and within the book pavilion, instantly tens of thousands of sword shadows appeared, changing endlessly. Although he didn't use internal energy and sword energy, many longing dragons appeared behind Zhongsho. Their shapes were uncertain, and their colors were also different. Recording these 9 books of the true dragon sword technique was also a way for him to sort out what he had comprehended. Some areas that he hadn't paid attention to, some exquisite tricks that he hadn't comprehended yet. While he was writing down the mnemonic chant, he was able to sort it out. Some of them came naturally, while some were memorized by him to be comprehended in the future. At this moment, every time the sword light in Zhongsho's hand reached the extreme, the long-ing dragons behind him would become more real. In the end, he stabbed out 3 times in a row, 9 long-ing dragons roaring out. He didn't use any true chi, but just the spiritual energy caused by the sword shadows was enough to slice the hundreds of feet-thick sandalwood desk in front of Zhongsho into pieces. This was also when Zhongsho purposely controlled himself to not let the sword light affect the bookshelf at the side. These last 3 swords were the core of the 9-9 long Ing sword technique, stack word. When all the sword shadows were retracted, Zhongsho frowned. I can only stack 3 strokes. He originally thought that if he turned these 9 books of the true dragon sword technique into a book, his gains would be even higher. Then, he broke out into a laugh, knowing that he had desired too much. The 9-9 long Ing swords, 3 strokes stacked, those below the ascended realm who could take it wouldn't be more than 3 fingers. Moreover, the situation just now did not seem to be due to his insufficient comprehension of the long Ing sword technique. Instead, it was due to the fact that his physical body was not strong enough to withstand it. Many of his movements were out of shape when he connected them with the sword technique, so he couldn't stack the next sword move. Looking within his soul ocean, the true spiritual charms had already formed up to 70. In just a few days, he would be able to try to form the stack word True Talisman. With a satisfied smile, Zhongsho sheathed his sword, following which he took the small bottle and pill recipe that Xianyuan Irin left before she left. Inside the small bottle were the drops of spirit salamander's blood. Xianyuan Irin only took a tiny bit. After diluting it, she used it to test out pills. Returning these to him, it seemed that these items were really useless apart from refining the spirit salamander blood essence pill. Zhongsho thought for a moment, then took out 1 drop and put it into his left arm, Xiao Jin's body. Then, the soft armor covering his left arm suddenly trembled like a ripple. It continued to tremble, and only after an hour did it slowly calm down. However, the color on the outside changed from the silver white with golden threads to bright red. Just as Zhongsho was about to add another drop of spirit salamander blood in, Xiao Jin's body trembled violently. Little Gold shook intensely. An intent anxiously reached out towards Zhongsho, like it was telling him, I don't want it even if I die, I am about to die. Don't harm Xiao Jin. Zhongsho was helpless. This little fellow had probably reached its limit. Its stomach had only digested 2 drops of true dragon blood. Letting it merge with the Saint Realm blood was indeed a little inappropriate. Thus, he didn't insist. However, was he just going to leave the remaining drop of spirit salamander blood lying around? Suddenly, he had an idea and took out the egg of the Ant Queen. This item was of little value to him, tasteless to eat but a waste to throw it away. He didn't want it, so he wanted to give it to a few people close to him as a spiritual pet. However, Xianyuan Irin and Chu Shui all shook their heads when they heard that it was a demon crystal Ant Queen. If he gave it to others, he wouldn't be at ease. He didn't even dare to sell such a top spiritual pet. In Donglin Cloud Continent, he would most probably end up helping his enemies. Squinting his eyes and hesitating for a moment, Zhongsho decisively used the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique to swallow and purify that drop of spirit salamander blood. It turned into a ball of light. Regardless of whether it was the vast, profound chi or a portion of the origin mark of the soul puppet, they were all mixed together and poured into the insect egg without caring about anything else. In the next instance, the egg started to tremble intensely. Several times, it seemed like the eggshell was about to break, but it stopped dangerously. In the end, when the egg calmed down, the eggshell seemed to have thickened by a little. The spiritual energy wave that it caused also slowly calmed down. Zhongsho's brows couldn't help but furrow. He could feel that this ant queen egg was still filled with life. However, something must have changed. As for what the change was, whether it was good or bad, he didn't know. With that, he was even more uncertain and didn't dare to give it to the people close to him. Who knew what would appear after the egg hatched? Or should he say a monster? Would it be the demon fire ant queen? His brows furrowed. Zhongsho first placed the egg in an exquisite box before placing it into a heaven and earth bag. No matter what changes it had, anyways, at this moment, he didn't have the mood to keep it as a spiritual pet and hatch it. Since that was the case, then no matter what it became, it had nothing to do with him. In the end, he took a look at the pill recipe. Maybe Xinyuan Irin knew how rich he was, which was why she didn't consider the price when she concocted the medicine. Just those few ingredients would consume up to 50 grade 7 beast crystals. However, if he used this recipe to refine pills, the effects would be really mild and the toxicity would be reduced. He had tried one just now and estimated that once he consumed more than 400 of this pill, it would affect his advancement in the future. However, it was much stronger than the previous version of the Spirit Salamander Blood Essence pill. As for the price, Zhongsho didn't care at all. However, there was still some annoyance in his eyes. As for pill refinement, he just needed to pass the recipe to Ruoshui, and her hidden guards would find reliable people to refine it. Gu Yekong's side also had some progress and had found the small island that he told him about. Till date, they had captured 100 dragon-horned winged horses. Not long later, they would be able to return. Now, everything was prepared, and they only lacked a suitable cavalry commander. Not only did he need a trusted aide, but he also needed to have great talent in the martial path. Did he really have to choose Zhongyuan? Thinking about that, Zhongsho's eyes turned red. His body was suddenly enveloped by a blood mist, rolling about endlessly. Suddenly, a drop of blood seeped out from his palm. Then, the vast aura of the spirit salamander blood also seemed a little weird. It was like a red jade pearl, crystal clear, like it contained shocking strength, causing the surrounding energy to surge and spiritual energy to surge. If one focused and looked at it, one would be able to seduce one's mind, causing violent thoughts to surge in one's heart and killing intent to rise. This was a seed. More accurately, it was the spiritual seed of the Blood Cloud Cavalry's Heart Sutra Blood Cavalry kill. People only knew that the Wulia country's Blood Cloud Cavalry were invincible in the world. That Blood Cavalry kill was one of the strongest support techniques and combination Heart Sutras in the Cloud world. However, very few people knew that this Heart Sutra could not only cause one to bleed and kill intent, but it could also control one's mind, which was why the Wulia country's Blood Cloud Cavalry were famous for being loyal and never betraying. When the Wulia country's king, all the cavalry died for the country. No one was spared. This also caused this Blood Cavalry Kill Heart Sutra to be lost. Until 7,000 years later, the ruins of a Wulia country were found. Only then did this cultivation method appear in the world once more. As for the training method of Blood Cavalry Kill, it was especially strange. During the Wulia country era, the country's royal family would cultivate a suitable seed and give it to the person who led the army. The latter would cultivate a spiritual seed and give it to the general under him, layer by layer, all the way to the lowest level of the Blood Cloud Cavalry, in the hands of those normal Blood Cloud Cavalry. He could directly use the seed bestowed upon him, which was the spirit blood. He had rapidly mastered Blood Cavalry Kill and had broken through to an extremely high boundary. Then, he had cultivated and comprehended the killing path martial intent. The most important thing was this first drop of spiritual blood. A suitable spiritual blood was hard to find. The Blood Cavalry Kill Heart Sutra focused on the killing path. If one didn't comprehend it enough, they wouldn't be able to succeed, which was why in the Wulya country's royal family, the first person to cultivate a suitable blood, maniac spiritual blood, was usually the heir to the throne. Moreover, they loved to kill, bloodthirsty and warlike. There were no exceptions. Luckily, in his last life, he was proficient in the killing path sword intent. Although he didn't specially cultivate it, be in the real world or in the illusionary world, it was covered in human blood. During the battle with Li Yaling, he comprehended a lot. However, when this spiritual blood was formed, it wasn't easy to find a suitable person to inherit it. The cultivation method of the Blood Cavalry kill wasn't just to control the troops. People who cultivated the killing path would often be controlled by the killing path intent and lose their rationality. For example, Li Yaling wasn't a person controlling the sword, but the sword controlling the person. The Blood Cloud Cavalry pushed this burden to the upper echelons. As long as the commander and general of the Blood Cloud Cavalry weren't controlled by the killing intent, the troops would be able to maintain their rationality, which was why he had everything prepared. All the matters of Gantian Mountain were handled properly. Even if he left for a year or so, it was okay. However, he was just one step away. He was still hesitating and unable to be at ease to cultivate in the common people's vast habitat. Just as he was laughing bitterly and keeping this drop of spiritual blood, Zhong Shou had an idea. He saw Chu Shui walk in from outside. After entering, her face was filled with joy. "Young master, guess who is back?" Zhong Shou was lazy to reply, directly looking at the door. Then he saw an extremely majestic person step in from outside. He was 9 feet tall, and his aura was still majestic. However, compared to a year ago, it was much more pressuring. His squarish face was expressionless. After looking at Zhong Shou, he smiled and bowed respectfully. "Uncle Ian." Zhong Shou instantly felt his mind relax. His entire body relaxed. This Yin Yang finally rushed back. When he looked Yin Yang up and down, his eyes narrowed even more. Earth Chakra, 7 meridians. Not only that, at this moment on Yin Yang's body, there were many more things that he couldn't explain clearly and couldn't understand. There was also a faint stench of blood that entered his nose. Chapter 395. At a corner of the Hanyan Palace of Gantian Mountain, in a secluded building, Zhong Yuan, Ruoshe, Chu Shui, and Shi Ruolin each took a side. Zhong Shou stood at the center. He held a token in his hand. It was the jade letter that Wei Su gave him, the one that could teleport 10,000 miles. On the front were some mysterious runes. At the back were the chants to activate this item. Zhong Shou silently chanted, following which the jade letter in his hand gave out a dim glow. In just a moment, a ball of spiritual light spread out. Coincidentally, it covered the surrounding 4 people. There were also 4 dim lights that shot out, searching all around. Only when it touched the token in the hands of Zhong Yuan and the other 3 did it lock. Zhong Shou thought to himself that, as expected, Wei Su gave 4 spots, and this teleportation jade letter could teleport 4 people. He was the owner of this treasure, and he could clearly feel that after the 4 lights locked onto him, the remaining power of the teleportation jade letter was used up. In the next instance, the heaven and earth spiritual energy around suddenly exploded. Zhong Shou only felt the situation in front of him suddenly change. Different from before, at this moment his body was totally illusionary. At a shocking speed, passing through the wooden walls, the forest, the giant mountains, the clouds, it was too much for the eye to take in. In a breath, the scenes in front of him changed hundreds of times. In the blink of an eye, who knew how many miles he had teleported? Zhong Shou was slightly distracted. When he came back to his senses, he had already landed within a wooden building. Chu Shui was still dizzy. Her eyes were totally unfocused. Ruoshui and Zhong Yuan were also frowning, trying their best to recover from the dizziness. Ruolin's face was also ashen white. However, when her eyes regained clarity, she looked at Zhong Shou. Right away, She looked curiously towards Zhongsho's hand, like she wanted to understand this thing. Zhongsho was also looking. However, he looked around, only to see that this place was the corner of a large building. There were all sorts of bookshelves around. Numerous books were laid out on them. Only the area where they were standing had some space left. Below the five of them was a complicated and precise spiritual formation. This place is the book building. A burning heat flashed across Zhongsho's eyes, although he had followed Wei Su to the common people's vast habitat once. However, strictly speaking, he had only spent a few hours in the ancestral hall. As for the situation outside, he had no idea. As for where Tsang Xingdao kept books, he had never been. Young master, this is the vast habitat? The spiritual energy here is really thick. Chu Shui's eyes finally regained some color. She first tried to use her soul power, which caused the heaven and earth spiritual energy around to ripple. Her body was covered in various colored lights. Seeing that, Chu Shui was delighted. She waved her hand and twirled around, bringing about spots of seven-colored spiritual light. However, moments later, she noticed Zhong Yuan and Ruo Shui looking over with weird gazes. Chu Shui was startled. Only then did she remember what kind of hell this was. She quickly stopped, cutely sticking out her tongue. Zhong Shou didn't care, directly walking towards the stairs. This book building had a total of 4 floors, 1,000 feet in length and width. There were 4 staircases. As for the books within, there were close to 1 million of them. Looking at the labels of the books, Samuraim's eyes slowly lit up. He wanted to immediately take them over and read them all. Out of these books, he had already seen thousands of them, the only ones that were lost in the future. A portion of them were ones that he had searched for in the last life, but had no luck to see. When he reached the lowest floor, Zhongsho walked to the door. His footsteps suddenly stopped, squinting as he looked to the side. It was an old man, his face dry and haggard as he sat on a wooden chair. His hair was thin, and there were only 3 to 5 strands of beard below his chin. At this moment, he was looking over with a smile that wasn't a smile. However, before this, when he went downstairs, his spiritual sense didn't notice the presence of this person. In his spiritual sense, this old man was like a dead thing. Zhongsho took in a deep breath, his face turning solemn as he bowed and cupped his fists. "May I ask, Senior?" Before he finished, the old man waved his sleeves. "There is no need to be so polite. I'm just a guard of this book building. My name is Han Fong. You can call me Senior Brother Han." Zhongsho's brows rose up. So this person was of the same generation as him. However, he was even more respectful as he bowed. "Greetings, Senior Brother Han." Seeing him suddenly appear within the book building, he wasn't surprised. It was obvious that he knew his identity. To be able to be of the same generation as him, the Tsang Shengdao, second-generation direct disciple, then he was at least 8,000 years ago, even 10,000 years ago, someone from the Cloud Desolate era. To be able to live till now, his cultivation definitely wasn't low. When Han Fong saw the situation, he laughed out. "The 6 of the Tsang Shengdao, second-generation direct disciples, are all rude, not caring about the rules and not caring about seniority. Who would have thought that the last one would come to honor the ceremony?" Zhongsho's brows rose up. He couldn't tell whether Han Fong's words were praising or insulting. Following which Han Fong's gaze turned solemn. "Your senior brother Wei has already told me about you inheriting the legacy of Senior Master Lin Xuanxuan. At that time, I only felt that he was too rash. How could the identity of a second-generation direct disciple be easily given to others? Seeing you today, I feel that the kid does have some sense. I heard that not long ago you inherited the legacy of Long Ying. I personally saw the puzzle that person set up on Dragon Gathering Mountain. It was pretty much making things difficult for people. For you to be able to break it, it isn't simple. Within these 100 years, in terms of sword path talent and luck, you can enter the top 3. Naturally, this time it can be considered that Long Ying's luck is good. I was just lucky." Zhongsho straightened his body, his expression expressionless. He didn't care about Han Fong's praise. Instead, it was the words that the old man said that made him curious. "Senior brother, To be able to enter the tutelage of Master Long Ying is my fortune. Why does senior brother Han say that about my master? Han Feng broke out into a laugh, shaking his hand. I don't have any intention to belittle you. I am just discussing the matter as it is. Do you know that the legacy of a 99 Long Ying sword is a knot in your master's heart? Zhong Shou's brows furrowed slightly. His eyes filled with more and more confusion. Looking at the arrangements that Long Ying made in Dragon Gathering Mountain, it didn't look like he cared about his sword technique legacy. That situation looked like he wanted to push everyone out of the door. Are you curious about what he did in Dragon Gathering Mountain? Like he saw through Zhong Shou's thoughts, Han Feng said leisurely, "This person is really stubborn. That year he left the inner and outer dragon gates in Dragon Gathering Mountain out of spite. No matter how others tried to persuade him, he wasn't willing to change. He said that normal people weren't worth his time. Only those who are truly talented in the way of the sword can inherit his 9-dragon shadow sword and perfect it." Zhong Shou still listened quietly. This senior brother Han still didn't explain why Long Ying would be so eager to become a legacy disciple. I remember that Long Ying martial saint reached the saint realm 9,700 years ago. 6,500 years ago, he had already broken through to the saint realm. He was just a step away from breaking through and going through his tribulation. 6,000 years later, he still wasn't able to cross over. Today, he is only left with 30 years of lifespan. Zhong Shou's pupils constricted. Based on what Long Ying said, the day that God Realm True Dragon would break free would be 30 years later. That Han Feng's voice still continued. The reason is that he still has a knot in his heart that he hasn't solved. He is afraid that if he fails his tribulation, no one will inherit the sword technique that he painstakingly created. He won't be able to have no worries in his heart, which was why he was unable to take that step in these 6,000 years. Which is why I said that he was lucky. He was originally about to die, but now he has a chance to live. Ling Yun's sect's ancestor was also at the Saint Realm. However, why do you think that Ling Yun's sect is so afraid of him? People who are about to die naturally have nothing to worry about. There are some rules that they don't need to bother about. Hearing that, Zhong Shou was at a loss. In his heart, he felt weird. How did this senior brother Han Feng know about this matter? Han Feng kept his words and didn't have any intention to explain. He looked away and swept the 4 people behind Zhong Shou. Your senior brother Wei left you 4 intersect disciple spots, and you used them all just like that? You don't feel heart pain at all. Oh, a 9-tailed shadow body, an unparalleled general seed. You do have the right to enter my Tsang Xingdao. After looking at Zhong Yuan and Ruo Shui, Han Feng exclaimed. He suddenly reached out and sucked Shi Rulin into his hand. His finger touched her brow, and instantly one could see threads of snow-colored patterns spreading out. Maniac Lion, Snow Seal. She is the descendant of the 6th spirit, Snow Lion. Zhong Shou was originally thinking about his master taking him in as a disciple. Long Ying would definitely try to break through within these few years. However, did one need to go through tribulation to advance to the end realm? He had never heard of it before. When he heard those words, he came back to his senses. Then he smiled. Based on what her people said, she is the Maniac Lion Snow Seal and is a pure blood descendant of the Snow Lion of the Palm. The old man used a few threads of internal energy to enter Shi Rulin's body. His expression changed slightly, and he placed Shi Rulin down. He didn't return her to Zhong Shou, but placed her by his side. How about this girl be my disciple? Zhong Shou was startled. After a short while, he came back to his senses. He thought to himself that his senior brother was really direct. He wanted to take Shi Rulin in as a disciple because he noticed something. He was really willing and was worried about not being able to find someone to teach Shi Rulin. With his senior brother, who was either Saint Realm or End Realm, he was much better than him. Rulin was at a loss. Then, she looked over timidly with a pleading gaze. Zhong Shou consoled her with a smile. Then he frowned. It isn't that Zhong Shou isn't willing. It is just that she is too young. At this age, it isn't suitable for her to become a disciple of senior brother. It is also unfair to the other disciples. Han Feng was so furious that he was amused, Zhongsho is just 15 and can become a second-generation direct disciple of my Tsang Xingdao. She's only a second-generation successor disciple. What's so inappropriate about that? After scolding a few times, Zhongsho held a token in his hand. He rubbed it absent-mindedly and instantly understood. He scolded once more. Don't you just want a few more intersect spots? I'll make it up to you with 2. Chapter 396. Don't you just want a few more intersect spots? I'll compensate you with 2. Saying this angrily, Hanfang didn't show any anger on his face. Instead, he was delighted. The 4 intersect disciple spots that Wei Su left were left for Zhongsho's protector in the future. Now that he snatched one, naturally he needed to compensate. Rulin felt like she had been abandoned by Zhongsho, her eyes filled with a pitiful expression. Zhongsho smiled, pointing at Hanfang. This person is much stronger than me and can teach you many amazing skills. In the future, you won't be bullied anymore. Oh, there's also really tasty candy to eat. When Rulin heard that, her eyes were filled with tears, her face filled with a begging expression. Zhongsho was helpless, thinking to himself that when did this little Rulin learn Chu Shui's skills? The killing power was huge, causing his heart to hurt like he had done something unforgivable and was about to part forever. His heart suddenly moved. Zhongsho's tone changed, bringing with it a little tempting intent. If you learn well, you can protect your brother Shou in the future. It's just acknowledging a master, not separating. Hanfang was originally furious. How could his personal disciple be the protector of others? Then he saw Rulin nod her head. Her tears stopped. She hurriedly shut her mouth, resisting the urge to scold him. Zhongsho pulled Zhan Shui in front of him. Senior brother Han, since you want to take in a disciple, why not add one more? She is called Chu Shui. Her talents are no lower than Rulin. He thought to himself that if he could throw this burden to this senior brother, that would be the best. When Chu Shui learned martial arts, no matter what it was, she would be able to learn it right away. However, that spiritual cultivation was taught to Dongwang Liushi. Even if she learned the great sky-changing meditation technique, it wasn't much better. This had been giving him a headache for a long time. Hanfang's expression turned cold. He glanced indifferently at Chu Shui, then didn't pay her any attention. This girl's talent isn't bad. Spirit refined, tiger bones, born with boundless strength. However, if you want to join my sect, you're still a little lacking. Compared to Rulin, she's much weaker. Zhongsho was stunned. Could it be that way? Su had not told this senior brother. Chu Shui had the combat martial body. He had no idea what a spirit refined tiger bone was. However, he knew Chu Shui's fighting instincts. It was the most extreme talent in this world. Even he himself was inferior to this little girl. If he had not been suppressed by him all this while in cultivated spiritual techniques, his cultivation would not be at the martial ancestor realm. Zhongsho raised his eyebrows and was about to explain. However, he felt Chu Shui suddenly tug on his sleeve. When he turned around, he saw that Chu Shui's face was filled with stubbornness and unwillingness. Her eyes were filled with rage. Zhongsho was first shocked when he saw the situation. A moment later, he knew that Hanfang's words had hurt this girl's pride. He couldn't help but find it amusing. He originally thought that this Shui was so dumb that she didn't have a heart. Thinking about it, Zhongsho kept the words that were at the tip of his mouth. He thought to himself that he couldn't get rid of this burden. However, the corners of his lips curled up, and he said with an evil smile, "Forget it. If you don't want to accept, then don't. Senior brother Han, don't regret it in the future." Hanfang scoffed coldly. "In this world, there is nothing that can make me regret. I am confident that my pair of old eyes have never seen wrong." The moment he said those words, Zhongsho was helpless. Hanfang had just accepted Rulin and didn't want the atmosphere between both sides to be too tense. He pulled Rulin's hand and directly pushed open the door of the book building, walking out in large strides. "Follow me." Along with Hanfang walking out of the book building, Zhongsho felt his breathing stop. He looked at the space in front of him, only to see that there were many houses nearby, all of them extremely majestic and vast, covering 100,000 feet. Although there was a huge sun hanging in the sky, there was no temperature at all. The space here seemed to always have a constant temperature. Who knows whether it was because the sun was too fake or because of the spiritual formation here. Around these buildings was a wilderness. There were mountains and water and even a piece of farmland. However, Zhongsho knew that the surrounding scenery was mostly fake. This common people's vast habitat was at most 100,000 feet. It was said that the 5 vast habitats were different from those natural shrines and spiritual houses. It was a space that the end realm experts of the cloud desolate era opened up within the cloud world. Those words were true. Slightly distracted, Zhongsho retracted his gaze. He looked behind him at the door, only to see that on it were the words Book Hiding Hall B. He couldn't help but feel delighted. With this Book Hiding Hall B, naturally there would be Book Hiding Hall A and Book Hiding Hall C. Wei Su said that there were tens of millions of books in this vast habitat. That was probably true, following which, from the corner of his eyes, he saw a bunch of people walking out from a building. They were dressed in all sorts of different styles and ages. Their cultivations were mostly around grade 5 or 6, with the lowest being grade 4. Zhongsho's eyes were filled with surprise. Senior brother, my Tsang Xingdao main hall actually has so many disciples? Looking out, weren't there close to 1,000? They're my Tsang Xingdao disciples, but they aren't from the main hall. They're the inner sect and core disciples of the 3 sects and 6 schools who came to the common people's vast habitat. On one hand, they can use the spiritual energy here to cultivate, and on the other, they can listen to the lessons here. Han Fong smiled and casually explained, however, the number of people in my Tsang Xingdao main hall isn't small. There are only 20 people who have the right to enter the mysterious Golden Life book. The direct disciples are only up to the 3rd generation. However, side branches like mine also have quite a few disciples. Zhongsho didn't care about the words behind. He was only curious about the first few sentences. Listen to the lesson. What does senior brother mean? This is the rule that your senior brother Wei Su said. Although your senior brother is a little unorthodox, this is the only thing that makes one respect him. Han Fong sighed while saying expressionlessly, common people's path vast habitat would invite some seniors to come over to teach and talk about the path. Those who have the right are all above the spiritual grandmaster realm. There are even celestial path cultivators who return to the vast habitat. Listening to classes in the vast habitat was much better than having their teachers teach them, which is why the 3 sects and 6 schools all take the chance to cultivate in the vast habitat as an honor. Naturally, this is to strengthen the sect and not cause the many branches of Tsang Xingdao to fall out with one another. Zhongsho was instantly enlightened. He knew that the many branches of Tsang Xingdao were okay if the founders were here, but if they weren't, without any connections, sooner or later they would split up. Wei Su's actions were great. With the camaraderie of learning from the same sect, the many branches would be like they were all in the same sect. Did the university system 10,000 years in the future come from this? The disciples of the various sects of Tsang Xingdao needed to be inner sect or core disciple to be able to enter. Just as he was filled with admiration, Han Fong turned around and looked towards him with deep meaning. Then, junior brother, have you thought about what identity you want to use to cultivate in our vast habitat? Zhongsho's mind was as clear as a mirror. He flipped his right hand and a token appeared in his hand. He originally thought that Wei Su gave him this token to make it convenient for him to use the identity of Tsang Xingdao disciple in the cloud world. Who knew that he would use it here? That was true. In this vast habitat, the 3 sects and 6 schools along with the main hall disciples wouldn't be less than 10,000. With so many people talking, he didn't need a new identity to cover up. Thinking seriously for a moment, Zhongsho shook the token in his hand. Then the words on it changed. It was Tsang Xingdao inner sect disciple Tanxio. Zhongsho's face also changed, like it was in the last life. However, although Zhongsho wanted to make his face more mature, returning to the look of a 30-year-old uncle. Unfortunately, the illusionary spell token in his hand wasn't that useful. After changing so much, he was still only 15 years old. Not far away, there was a pond. Looking at the reflection, Zhongshou was instantly entranced. How long had it been since he last saw this face? His mind also seemed to have returned to the last life when the Sword Emperor Tanxiu was still young. This look, not too handsome, but not ugly, it couldn't be more normal. Your identity is only intersect. You really know how to hide your strength and bide your time. Han Fang's eyes were filled with shock. Although Zhongshou's current appearance was normal, that noble and slightly sharp aura couldn't be hidden. In his heart, he scoffed. In the eyes of people with good eyes, you are as eye-catching as a lantern. Where are you hiding? His voice continued. Unfortunately, if you want to enter the Book Hiding Hall B, or even the Jiazi Hall, you need the identity of a core disciple. Zhongshou was helpless. He could only change the words on the token, changing it from intersect to core disciple. After thinking for a while, he added the words third generation to it. Han Fang smiled and didn't bother about him, following which he swept his eyes over Zhong Yuan and the others. Zhongshou came to his senses. This Zhong Yuan's unparalleled general seed fame wasn't any lower than his. There would be many people who recognized their background. However, he only had one side of this illusionary spell token. So how should he change it? Zhong Yuan's expression suddenly changed as he took out his token. At this moment, the words on it were actually able to change. It directly changed the name to Zhong Heir. Seeing Zhongshou as the big one, naturally he was the second. He changed his appearance just by slightly shifting the position of his brows. It became totally different. Similarly handsome, but with a little more sunshine. Only then did Zhong Shaxin understand that Zhong Yuan and the others' tokens were most probably linked treasures. Taking the meaning of mother and child, his teleportation jade letter and illusionary spell token were the main artifacts of this set of spiritual artifacts. Ruo Shui also followed suit, changing her name to Shui Ruo. Chu Shui originally didn't know how to change her name. Only when she saw the name Ruo Shui gave her did she relax. She also flipped her name and changed it to Xuechu. In the blink of an eye, the three of them looked different from before. Only Shi Ruolin was still young. No one would recognize him, so he didn't need to change his name. Anyways, he didn't plan to use this identity for too long. Chapter 397. After changing his appearance, Han Fang brought Zhongshou and the others around the vast habitat, introducing the various buildings. The Scripture Depository, Scripture Lecture Hall, Alchemy Pavilion, and so on were all available. What Zhongshou was most interested in were the lecture halls. Each time he passed, he would stop and listen carefully. However, after a few times, he felt disappointed. The lecturers that Sang Shengdao invited were all of high standards. However, since he grasped the sword soul in Dragon Gathering Mountain, the martial path mysteries that they talked about were too shallow and of no help at all. He could only leave helplessly. There were only a few places that talked about spirit master techniques that surprised him. He was just worried about not having a proper spiritual technique legacy. As for Tsang Xingdao and the other lecturers, they were all basic knowledge. The lessons were all about the basics of spiritual techniques. Not only were they detailed and simple, but they also didn't have the obscurity and fog of those spirit master books, which scratched his itch. If it wasn't for Han Fang impatiently rushing him, Zhongshou would have wanted to immediately walk in and listen carefully. There were a total of 15 lecture halls, which were extremely huge. Each place could seat 3,000 people. There were only 3 spiritual law scripture halls, but 12 martial Dao scripture halls. Sang Shengdao's spiritual technique attainments were only weaker than those of the Taoist faction. However, in this world, there were still several times more martial cultivators than spirit masters. There were also halls that talked about pill refining and artifact crafting, as well as formations and unorthodox techniques. Zhongshou followed Han Fang and looked around, not daring to be interested, until he reached a place where the most majestic scripture hall entered his eyes. He was slightly shocked. Where is this place? It wasn't that there was anything unusual about this hall. It was that this place was really noisy and noisy. From far away, one could hear the arguments within. When Han Fang heard that, his expression was complicated as he raised his head and looked at the signboard of the hall. Chosher Hall is where my sect disciples understand the path. Zhong Shou's brows rose up. Understand the path? Understand what path? After he walked in, the moment he stopped, the sounds of quarreling could be heard. In my opinion, there should be a revolution in this world. Now, in the 5 continents and 12 islands, the rich had endless fields, while the poor had no place to stand. Behind the vermilion gates, meat and wine stink, while on the road there are frozen bones. Why was it that some people, after being born, did not have to do anything and could enjoy riches and honor? Why should the people work hard without complaint, but they can only live a poor life and be ordered around by others? Everyone in the world is equal, so wealth should also be equal. Brother Yin's words are wrong. Although those rich people are mostly parasitic worms, they are lazy people. However, his wealth was obtained through the hard work of his father and ancestors. Being protected by his father, he was also of the righteous path. If everyone was equal, then who in this world would be willing to work hard and improve themselves? If this continued, wouldn't it be a mess? I, Tsang Shangdao Shizi, want the people of the world to be able to control their own destiny, to be able to make their own voices heard, and no longer be slaves to others. Hey, if wealth is not equal, then there's a difference between the top and the bottom. This world also has classes, so where is the equality? Wealth is created by the hands of people. In my eyes, those merchants and nobles are stealing their hard work. They should all be killed. That's right. Forget about those people who followed the right path to get rich. What annoys me the most is that they collude with money and force, causing the people of the world to suffer. It is because of this that if I, Song Xingdao, take over, I will make the politics clear, ban martial arts and spirits, and reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. To make the rich do good. When Zhongshou heard this, his brain turned into paste, thinking to himself, who were these people? As expected from Song Xingdao, taking a look at the door, there were actually no less than 1,000 people. They were all shaking their heads and debating. There are no teachers teaching them, and no one bothered about them. Zhongshou shook his head and directly walked away. Then he looked diagonally across. The noise there was even louder than here. There was also a signboard with 3 words written on it, Evidence Hall. Zhongshou followed Hanfang and walked over. Just as he heard one sentence, he was shocked, only to hear one person say, "When I returned home last year, I had prepared 400 intense fire talismans and gathered 3 to 5 comrades to blow up the governor's family. Unfortunately, before I was prepared, the sect called me over to the vast habitat to cultivate. What a waste. Have you all heard of that Lehigh governor? He is famous for being violent. Last year, he raised the taxes in the city to 4% out of 10. He also worked with a few dog merchants to occupy 120,000 mu of land around the city, forcing the people of Lehigh to have a hard time. How despicable! How despicable! Such an evil person. You should get rid of him before coming back. You are all wrong. This method is too extreme. Although we treat equality as our responsibility, we can't represent the heavens. Such an evil person will naturally be punished by the heavens. We just need to spread the path of the common people and let the people know that there will be a time when the heavens and earth change. Hey, I think you have read too many Buddhist scriptures. Why didn't you say those words in front of those Confucians? When we were with the Shi ancestor, we also had such intentions. However, what did the Confucians, Buddhists, and Taoists do? They gathered all their elites to kill thousands of my Tsang Shengdao disciples. In this world, the fist is the biggest, a tooth for a tooth, blood for blood. Once we beat them into submission, the heavens and earth will change. This junior brother's brain is still a little muddled. Don't bother about him. However, speaking of using the intense fire talisman to assassinate, that method is indeed a little outdated. 10 days later is my holiday. This time I'm going back to prepare to do something big. Do you all know about that Hellion Iron Mountain in the central continent? 3 million innocent people are locked up there to dig for ores. Every day, no matter if they are old or young, they all have to work hard and be whipped. I am prepared to bury some explosive spiritual formations in the noble houses of the nearby cities. If those officials and nobles aren't willing to release them, I will blow them all up. Hellion Iron Mountain? I have heard of it before. I heard that 30 years ago, 99% of the people in Yin City were innocent. What does the Yin City Pass Guard Rebellion have to do with them? Senior Brother's method is great. However, to release these crimes, it is best to target that Han King. Why don't you add me in? However, this plan needs to be more detailed. Blow people up? How about you add me in? Using explosive spiritual formations to kill people is what I like the most. Are we really going to use explosive spiritual formations? Senior Brothers, it is okay if those nobles die. But what about their servants? I am afraid it is a little inappropriate. What is inappropriate? If we want to change the heavens and earth, we need to make some sacrifices. Those servants were all accomplices to the villain. Even if they're innocent people, to be able to die for these 3 million people, they should smile in the underworld. Zhongsho's lips curled up, thinking to himself, smile your grandmother. No wonder this Zhang Shengdao's reputation wasn't good. 10,000 years later, they were still discriminated against. This was pretty much the base of terrorists. They were all people who wanted the world to be in chaos, and scrupulous people. All of a sudden, he didn't know whether joining this Zhang Shengdao was a blessing or a curse. Anyways, his future was worrying. Just as he was about to leave, he heard a voice. Sorry, senior sister. The reason why I returned late was because of the Gantian Mountain matter. I originally thought that the Gantian Mountain Monster King battle would be unstable and there might be a chance to cause trouble, which was why I stayed there. Unfortunately, that night, we were prepared to set fire all around to cause chaos. That Zhongsho had already wiped out the various races and Zhongshu in the city. Then, I thought about the new ruler ascending the throne. We also had a chance to purchase armor for 10,000 people and contacted thousands of poor people, as well as some of Zhongshu's people to be ready to revolt. Who knew that Zhongsho would be so amazing? With just a few new policies, he calmed the hearts of the people. In just a few months, he defeated Taoyuan Mountain City and expanded by 10,000 miles. Seeing that there was no chance, we helplessly returned. We suffered a huge loss this time. Zhongsho, I have heard of this person. I heard that he is talented and strategic, a top talent. Not long ago, he killed Long Ruo's physical body and joined Long Ying. What he loves the most in his life is to act cool. He likes to hide his cultivation and wander around to trick people. Zhongsho's head was covered in cold sweat. So under his rule, there were such people with evil intentions. Luckily that night, he was quick to cut the Gordian knot. If not, who knows what would happen if this dragged on. He remembered this voice and was prepared to let Ruo Shui investigate. In the future, it would be best if he wiped them out all at once. The words of the girl made him feel slightly happy. He thought to himself that his name had spread far and wide. Only the last sentence made him slightly unhappy. Zhongsho wasn't willing. Sighing, Zhongsho silently walked away. He glanced at Hanfang. Did Senior Brother set up the Chiao and D halls? That's right. He seemed to be confused about these two places. Hanfang's tone was also really weird. Your Senior Brother said that the theory of the world would only become clearer the more one debated, which was why he set up these two halls. The Chiao and D halls were set up to debate and debate. The D halls were to gather ideas and discuss how to use our common people path. However, who knows what happened in the end? It slowly changed. Even your Senior Brother was helpless and could only allow it to happen. Don't worry, these people are just talking about it. With the sect elders restricting them, they wouldn't dare to mess around. Only then did Zhongsho calm down slightly. However, he still felt a bitter taste in his mouth. Most of them wouldn't dare to mess around. Then there were still some people who could ignore the sect restrictions. The last place was where they stayed. Zhongsho and the others were arranged into a 3-section courtyard by Hanfang. Although it was wide, the scenery was also really beautiful. The decorations within were really simple. Apart from the bed and cupboards, there was nothing else. There was a normal spirit gathering formation that could gather spiritual energy. On the door, there were some words, first courtyard. Zhongsho was just thinking that the sect was too simple. The special treatment they gave him as a second-generation direct disciple was only so little. Was it because they were too poor? Only to hear Han Fong say, "Since I Tsang Sheng Dao want to make everyone equal, then naturally I will do it myself." Although there are direct and core disciples in the sect, they are different. However, their cultivation conditions are the same. Even I am pretty much the same. Chapter 398. Since I, Tsang Sheng Dao, want to make all living things equal, then naturally I have to do it myself. Although there are direct and core techniques in the sect, there are differences between the inner and outer disciples. However, the cultivation conditions are the same. Even I am the same. Hearing those words, Zhongsho was slightly surprised. Inner and outer disciples are the same? However, since the cultivation methods that can be cultivated are different, how can they be treated the same? Who says they're different? Han Fong smiled, his face filled with pride. Others treat the true techniques of the sect like treasures, keeping it a secret and not passing it down. Only I, Tsang Sheng Dao, open it up for others to learn. Looking at one's character, if one can gain the recognition of the elders, then they will open it up for you to learn. As long as you can understand, you can learn it. This is the rule that Senior Master Shi Zi set in the past, and it hasn't changed for 10,000 years. This is why our Tsang Sheng Dao 3 sects and 6 schools are seen as the demon path. Our number of disciples is far less than the other sects, but we have many talents. Using our own strength to go up against Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, such that they don't dare to be arrogant. Zhongsho didn't fully believe it. He remembered that when Wei Su passed him the insight mysterious lightning body training art and the great sky changing meditation technique, that wasn't what he said. However, thinking about it carefully, Wei Su only said that he couldn't pass the secret techniques of these 2 sects to outsiders. The person who cultivates it will be an inner disciple of our Tsang Sheng Dao. This was the last sentence. At that time, he understood that one needed to be an inner disciple to be able to learn these 2 cultivation methods. Thinking about it now, what his senior brother meant was that after one learned it, one would have the right to enter the inner sect of Tsang Sheng Dao. Strictly speaking, these 2 grade 10 Saint Spirit cultivation methods weren't something that normal people could cultivate. Zhong Yuan was able to comprehend enough due to the power of lightning. As for Chu Shui and Ruo Shui, even with his guidance, they still hadn't truly entered the sect. On the other hand, it was open for you to choose from until you learned all the skills you could learn. On the other hand, they kept it a secret and concentrated their resources to nurture their core disciples. It was hard to say who was better between the 2. However, Shizi's breadth of mind was top-notch and worthy of respect. He didn't know if it was because in his previous life, he went everywhere to seek knowledge. As for Tsang Sheng Dao's actions, he was really impressed. However, in the next moment, Han Fong laughed bitterly. However, it is also because of this that many truly talented people miss out on me, Tsang Sheng Dao. Even geniuses like the ancient saints can only be considered as ordinary disciples in Tsang Sheng Dao. Therefore, there are not many real talents who are willing to join our Tsang Sheng Dao. It was also thanks to the disciples' hard work. Even after 10,000 years, they still hadn't declined. I wonder if junior brother regrets it now? When Zhongsho heard that, he laughed involuntarily, his expression calm. I don't know what other people think, but the method Senior Master Shi Zi set is what I want. When Han Fong heard that, he was startled. He thought that Zhongsho would grumble a little. Even if he didn't say it, he wouldn't feel comfortable in his heart. He was also prepared to persuade him to calm his heart. Who knew that in the end, it would be such a reply? His expression was like he was really happy and wasn't faked. People with talent were mostly prideful and felt that they weren't normal. People like Zhongsho were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. This junior brother was really a weird person. Han Fong shook his head, casually explaining some common people's vast habitat rules, and was prepared to leave. He originally wanted to bring Shirulin along. However, in the end, seeing that this brat wanted to cling on to Zhongsho and not leave even if she died, he could only helplessly give up. Just as he stepped out of the courtyard, Hanfang suddenly seemed to have thought of something and abruptly turned around. I forgot something. Junior brother, you must remember that it's best not to tell anyone that your name is in the mysterious Golden Life book. When Zhongsho heard that, his brows couldn't help but rise up. Junior brother is willing to hear the details. There is no other reason. That mysterious life golden book can not only protect broken souls from being destroyed, but can also extend one's life. Do you think that as a God realm person without a special bloodline, how can I live from 10,000 years ago until now? Junior brother, do you know? The moment your name is in the mysterious life golden book, you have half a life as compared to others? After Hanfang finished, he gave out a self-mocking laugh, waving his sleeves and leaving. Zhongsho was startled, only recovering after a long while. Half a time, which meant that with his current realm, he could live for 300 years. Then that mysterious life golden book could help him live to 450 years old? No wonder this item would be the sect protecting treasure of Tsang Shengdao. Following which he squinted his eyes and looked upwards. He knew that Tsang Shengdao's ancestral hall wasn't within this common people palace, but the highest point of this place, where the stars revolved around. Just now, when he entered this common people vast habitat, he could clearly feel that there was something in that ancestral hall that was connected to his soul, like it was calling out to him. Could it be the mysterious Golden Life book? No, it shouldn't be so intense. That's right. It was that sword, the celestial sword that senior brother called God Refined. He had a faint impulse to leap up and grab the sword in his hand. However, he felt weird in his heart. Based on what senior brother Wei said, one needed to be at least God realm to be able to grasp it. Could it be that this feeling of his was actually an illusion? All of a sudden, he was so focused that he didn't even notice that senior brother Han had already left. Until a commotion broke out around Zhongsho came back to his senses. Looking out the door, he saw that there were tens of people standing not far away. Their expressions were weird. Who knows if it was already nighttime and the lesson in the scripture hall had already ended. More and more people gathered here, and the gazes that were cast over were exactly the same. Zhongsho instinctively touched his face. There wasn't anything unusual. In the next moment, he seemed to have comprehended something as he looked at the nameplate of First Courtyard A. When he came over, he didn't think too much about it. Now that he thought about it, it was most probably because this courtyard or the name of the courtyard was special. He originally wanted to find someone to ask, but looking at the situation, he most probably couldn't. Zhongsho decisively closed the courtyard door, cutting off all the gazes outside. Then his brain swelled up. Who knows why? After being stared at by these people like monkeys for a moment, the urge to try disappeared without a trace. Even the faint connection from before was totally gone. Zhongsho couldn't help but mock himself. As expected, it was just an illusion. Throughout the day and night, they had been cleaning the place. Who knows how long this place had been empty for? The dust was a foot thick. Luckily, the few of them had spells on them. Using the wind talisman to sweep, they could blow away the dust. Then, Chu Shui excitedly started to take out the various luxurious items in her heaven and earth bag and place them all around. Zhongsho himself didn't mind. He was the same as Zhong Yuan. He just needed a bed to rest. However, if he could live a more comfortable life, he wouldn't object. A large portion of his energy was focused on modifying the spiritual formation. Before this, he had already asked Hanfang. Although the sect treated all disciples the same and treated them the same. However, they didn't stop disciples from using their own money to live a good life. Zhongsho decided to go all out, covering the entire courtyard with the spiritual gathering formation. Every day, it would consume 20 grade 4 beast crystals. Naturally, such a high price caused the spiritual gathering ability of the formation to pretty much reach the peak. All of a sudden, numerous spiritual energy waves surged within the vast habitat. It exceeded the normal level by 3 times before it stopped. The spiritual energy density within the vast habitat was originally 10 times that of the outside world. Within this small courtyard, it was already 30 times that of Gantian Mountain. The most direct effect was when one cultivated the insight mysterious lightning body training art and the great sky changing meditation technique. In a night, even without using pills to help, the cultivation effect was 60% better than usual. Zhongsho tried to cultivate for half a night. Then, he couldn't help but sigh. The effects of cultivating within the vast habitat were really different. The Hanyan Palace at the peak of Gantian Mountain was considered rich in spiritual energy. However, the effects couldn't be felt normally. Only the rich spiritual energy within the vast habitat and the spiritual house could truly help one's cultivation. With such a treasured land, even a disciple with ordinary aptitude would have extraordinary achievements in the future. On the morning of the second day, Zhongsho let Zhong Yuan and the other three do their own things. He himself couldn't wait and dashed over to the book hiding hall B. He took out the tens of martial arts books that he had been looking forward to. Then, he headed straight for the scripture hall that taught spiritual cultivation to listen to the lesson. Although it was just some basics, once it was compared to what he had learned, he had a feeling of understanding. At the start, it was still okay. Slowly, Zhongsho felt like he was in the army. At the start, the people around him were focused on the lesson. Gradually, there was a lot of discussion, and they all moved away from their seats one after another. It was like Zhongsho had poison around him and didn't dare to get close. Occasionally, the gazes that looked over were all different. Some were envious, some were unhappy, some were shocked, some were pitiful, some were curious, etc. Zhongshoxin's heart sunk slightly. Then, he understood that this was most probably a continuation of what happened yesterday. Unfortunately, this place wasn't Gantian Mountain. The people around him were all from the same sect. If not, he could just grab one and find out the reason. The lessons here would last an hour, and they could rest for 8 minutes. One of the scripture halls talked about the foundations from grade 1 to grade 5. The other was about grade 6 and above, all talismans, spells, and cultivation path from the return to Sun Realm to the true image realm. Based on what Han Fong said, the lessons here were a continuous cycle. His luck was good and coincidentally met the lecturer in charge of teaching the foundations of spiritual cultivation who had just been invited over. He could start from the beginning. During the lesson, Zhongsho was still able to focus. However, after it ended, his heart sunk. He could feel the coldness and disdain in the eyes of his fellow sect members. Just as he didn't know why, from the corner of his eye, he saw two extremely familiar figures. Yinran, Yunlan. Chapter 399. Yinran, Yunlan. Zhongsho was shocked. Those two people stood out amongst the many Tsang Shengdao disciples. They were like pearls in the sand. One couldn't help but look over. That eye-catching glow was pretty much impossible to ignore. Didn't the two of them say that they were going to return to the sect after parting ways at Dragon Gathering Mountain? Why did they come here? However, in his heart, he only felt slightly weird. The two of them were disciples of Tsang Shengdao. It wasn't a weird thing for them to come to the common people's vast habitat to cultivate. What was surprising was that the two of them acted like they didn't see him. Their expressions were also slightly cold as they walked out of the door of the scripture hall. Then, he suddenly recalled that he had already changed his appearance. He didn't recognize the two of them. Even if they guessed his identity, it wasn't appropriate for them to acknowledge him in front of so many people. Zhongsho thought about it for a moment before following casually. Passing through several corridors, he walked into a huge garden. As expected, the two of them were waiting for him. Yinlan greets your highness. How have you been? After parting ways at Dragon Gathering Mountain, your highness' cultivation seems to have become even deeper. Looking at Zhongsho's arrival, Xin Yunlan seemed to have become a totally different person. Her face was filled with a smile, not having that ice-cold expression from before. That Zhao Yinran didn't treat him well, scoffing coldly as a greeting. Zhongsho smiled, casually removing the illusionary technique on his body. He didn't ask why the two of them were in the common people's vast habitat, directly nodding his head. Yunlan, you came at the right time. I was worried that no one would play the zither for me. Without Xian Yunlan's soul calming spiritual tune to suppress his soul, he didn't dare to use the illusionary heart mirror recently. Although it was an illusionary realm that he created, if he suffered any injuries within it, it would harm his soul. On the other side, when Xin Yunlan heard that, she didn't mind at all. Instead, she smiled sweetly. Xin Yunlan came precisely because of that. Back then, I set a 3-month agreement with your highness. It had yet to be completed. 10 days ago, I came to common people's vast habitat to wait for your highness to fulfill my promise. Zhao Yinran was dumbfounded. She secretly cursed Zhongshu for being shameless. She directly treated Xin Yunlan as a coolie, and the latter was actually willing to do it. His expression turned solemn. Zhongshu, I don't expect you to break through to the Ascended Realm within a year. I hope that a year later you can work hard and at least charge into the Daoxuanwu realm. Can you do that? If you're still a man, then don't disappoint her. Zhongshu was stunned. He stared at Zhao Yinran, then used a questioning gaze to sweep toward Xin Yunlan. Could it be that this Zhao Yinran had eaten gunpowder? Why are you speaking so rudely? In a year's time, he would be able to reach the Xuanwu-Qi Meridian realm. However, if one considered the foundations of his world's shocking spiritual sense, this speed was still a little too fast. In the past, looking at this Zhao Yinran, she didn't seem like a person with no patience. Xin Yunlan was good at understanding others. Seeing Zhongshu's expression, she instantly smiled. It is because of that sword, Prince Juyu. Your Highness might not have heard that this Juyu is one of the 3 pinnacle swords of the Cloud World. Legend has it that he is the best at using the sword in the younger generation. Not long ago, he swore that he would go one by one to challenge the 19 spiritual houses, 10 shrines, 5 vast habitats, and 3 heavenly caves. Not long ago, he defeated 2 great spiritual house sects in a row. Sword Prince Juyu? Zhongshu's brows furrowed. He had heard of the 3 pinnacle swords of the Cloud World from Suchen. However, as for who it was, he didn't know. He only knew that there was Lei Dong's enemy, spiritual Sword Ruo Tao. In his heart, he was filled with respect. Challenging all the spiritual houses, shrines, vast habitats, and heavenly caves, this was a true sword testing the world. What he had always wanted to do, this sword Prince Juyu had already started to do. He also understood why Zhao Yinran would be so anxious. 7 Spirit Sect was the head of all the spiritual houses. Since Suchen wanted to challenge the 19 spiritual houses, 7 Spirit Sect naturally wouldn't be able to escape. Someone who could be on the same level as spiritual Sword Ruo Tao wouldn't be any weaker than Lei Dong. That sworn brother of his was now a genuine martial exalted. Taking in a deep breath, Zhongshu reluctantly nodded his head. I will try. However, such a person, even if you break through to the peak of Xuanwu, you won't be his opponent. Within your 7 Spirit Sect, probably only your senior master, He Shuiying, has the ability to fight him. Zhao Yinran relaxed. She and Zhongshu had a reverse relationship. Originally, with her talent, breaking through to Xuanwu ancestor within a year was impossible. However, if she could get Zhongshu to reverse nurture her, she had some confidence. When she heard the last few words, she wasn't angry. She also knew that it was too much for her to fight Juyu now. She forced Zhongshu today because she had a bit of hope and didn't want 7 Spirit Sect to be humiliated. She muttered and was just about to thank him. In the next instance, she heard Zhongshu smile. However, if you want me to agree, I have a condition. In this year, you have to be my maidservant's training partner. You have to work hard without any complaints. If not, there is no need to talk about it. Zhao Yinran was instantly furious. The anger was stuck in her chest and couldn't be vented out. She should have known that she would come to beg this fellow. So how could she not pay a price? Zhongshu didn't bother about her. Looking curiously at Xin Yunlan, what happened today? I remember that I didn't offend any Song Xingdao sect members. Why does it seem like the 2 of you don't dare to speak to me? When Xin Yunlan heard that, she helplessly shook her head. Your Highness indeed didn't offend anyone before, but now that you have moved into First Courtyard, you have offended some people badly. Zhongshu was enlightened, thinking to himself that it was because of that courtyard. First Courtyard. Actually, when he saw those words, he had a bad feeling about it. However, due to Han Fang's arrangements, he couldn't reject it. Following which Xian Yunlan continued, "My Cang Xingdao has an unwritten rule. Only the most outstanding person out of all the disciples of the Common People Hall and the 3 sects and 6 schools can occupy this first courtyard A. Anyone who moves in will be able to ascend to the celestial realm." For 10,000 years, there was no exception. 20 years ago, when Taiyuan's sect's water fairy left, this place was empty. Originally, in this generation, Taiyuan, Xianyang, and Hanling sects all had outstanding disciples who had hopes of moving in. Not long ago, they were fighting to the death for these rights. Your Highness appeared out of nowhere and directly took over this first courtyard A. Isn't that hateful? Zhong Shou could only laugh bitterly. Speaking of which, he had indeed offended someone badly. A person whose background he didn't know, who he was for no reason took over this thing that they had been fighting for so long. If it was him, he would also be annoyed. Taiyuan sect Xuanya, Xianyang sect Xian, Hanling sect Luoshi. These 3 people are known as the 3 heroes of Cang Xingdao. They're also the ones who are respected the most by our Cang Xingdao disciples. Their influence is huge, not only within their own sect, but the other 3 sects and 6 schools all have people who follow them. They're the only ones who follow them. Zhao Yanran had also recovered, her expression expressionless with a bit of mocking intent. These 3 are the talents of the 3 sects. Maybe they don't care about where this first courtyard belongs to. However, their friends and fellow apprentices all hate your Highness to the point of gnashing their teeth, feeling indignant for them. Right now, they're all rubbing their fists, wanting to teach your Highness a lesson. I'm afraid it won't be easy for you to subdue them. Zhong Shou smiled, not intending to continue the conversation. The questions in his heart had been solved, so he didn't have the intention to chat with these 2 girls. He had just arrived at the common people's vast habitat, and there were simply too many things he needed to do. As for those people with bad intentions, he didn't bother about them at all. If they weren't happy, then he would just beat them. He entered Cang Xingdao to learn skills. If he could keep a low profile, naturally it would be best. However, since his senior brother Han Fang had already placed him in such a position, then he wouldn't be afraid. He also didn't have any thoughts of being humble and didn't have any intentions to settle things peacefully. Anyways, Zhong Shou was going to occupy this first courtyard A. When he returned to the scripture lecture hall, the surrounding fellow disciples still had a cold attitude and kept a respectful distance from him. At this moment, Zhong Shou didn't care at all. He could have some peace and quiet. He casually listened to the lecture, just like before when he started to learn the sword path. He was focused, his entire body like a sponge, absorbing all the basics of spells that he could use. During the day, there were a total of 4 lessons. In the morning, it was about cultivation. Occasionally, they would talk about actual combat. In the afternoon, it was about spells and talismans. Zhong Shou didn't listen to every lesson, only choosing what he could use. Whenever they talked about talismans, he would leave. He went to the book-hiding pavilion to find a quiet place to read books alone. It was like that for several consecutive days. He didn't see anyone jump out to find trouble with him. Only the surrounding gazes were becoming more and more unfriendly. Zhong Shou could roughly feel that these few days of life seemed calm, but there were hidden currents flowing under the lake water. What made him happy was that Zhong Yuan and Ruoxue were like fish in water in this common people palace, not feeling any discomfort at all. They were busy every day. Zhong Yuan focused on the martial path, but recently because he wanted to cultivate spells, he would occasionally accompany Zhong Shou to listen to lessons. Ruoxue shuttled between the 2 sides, like she had entered a treasure trove. She was busy every day. Only Chu Shui didn't know what to do. Even in the martial path lessons that she loved the most, she couldn't understand most of it, her face filled with confusion. It wasn't until 2 days later, when Zhao Yanran came to be her sparring partner, that her spirits were lifted. She finally had some energy every day. This made Zhong Shou sigh once more. Did this brat's intelligence get taken over by that perverted instinct? Sure, Rulin would be fetched by Han Fang every morning and would only be released in the evening. Zhongsho only knew that this brat's body slowly had some internal energy and was getting stronger and stronger. He didn't care about her progress, only knowing that with a God Realm expert personally teaching her, she was much more reliable than him. Chapter 400. Oh, it seems like I can form this stack, true spiritual talisman today. Within the main room of the courtyard, Zhongsho closed the thick book in his hand and was deep in thought. Many of the books in the book hiding building were left from the ancient era. At that time, there was no paper and they could only use bamboo and bee skins to record. The book in his hand was such a case. It was called the Spirit Ocean Stacking Talisman Records. 2 days ago, he found it in a corner of the book hiding building B. Within Song Xingdao's book hiding building, there was a dust-removing and bug-repelling spiritual formation. The temperature was also constant, such that the books within wouldn't rot for 100,000 years. However, who knows how many years had passed since this Spirit Ocean Stacking Talisman Records had been read by others. When Zhongsho took it and flipped it open, it was filled with a rotten smell. This book was left behind by a person called Taoist Ling Hai roughly 10,000 years ago. By chance, he discovered the profoundness of the stack word and tried to stack spells and talismans on top of one another. However, in the end, he still failed. However, before he died, he recorded all his comprehensions of this talisman, as well as all his attempts into the book. Then, it landed in the hands of Song Xingdao and was flipped open by Zhongsho. As it was an unsuccessful work, a bright pearl was covered in dust. Using a full 2 days, Zhongsho finished reading it. Just 20,000 words. He pondered on each and every one of them, comprehending the true meaning within. At this moment, the vague thoughts in his heart had become countless times clearer. So, it wasn't only Master who thought of using this stack word technique. Breaking out into a laugh, Zhongsho's mind calmed back down as he entered deep meditation. Just as he was looking at his own spirit sea, his spiritual sense suddenly rippled in his mind. After that, when this feeling arose, it could no longer be stopped. It surged endlessly in his spirit sea. As expected, Zhongsho didn't hesitate at all, knowing that this moment was the best time to form the true spiritual talisman. The moment such a thought rose up, close to 100 true spiritual talismans flew up from the soul power ocean. Then, they gathered together one by one. The entire process was smooth and smooth. Looking out, there was a stack word above the soul ocean. It also formed numerous spiritual patterns that connected with the other 7 talismans. A spiritual meridian was formed along with it, laying across the soul power ocean. A total of 8 spirit veins corresponded to 8 true spiritual talismans. It caused the soul ocean to be more condensed and filled with more potential. The vast source spirit was constantly replenishing the spiritual energy in the soul. Some of it even leaked out of his body. Success. When the last stack word was formed, Zhongsho felt that his soul ocean whirlpool had once again expanded. It wasn't as exaggerated as before when he advanced to the return to Sun Realm, but it increased close to 70% of his soul energy. Even his monster body could sense it. 2 fox ears appeared on his head, and a total of 6 fox tails suddenly rushed out from behind him. Why did you grow a tail again? Are you done yet? Towards this monster body, Zhongsho had a huge headache. On one hand, it was helpful, and on the other hand, he didn't like it. Just as he was about to retract all the foxtails, Zhongsho suddenly felt that within his soul ocean, the illusionary image of the 7-tailed sky fox suddenly changed. Originally, it was the image of the 7 tails, but at this moment, one more suddenly appeared. At the same time, an indescribable message suddenly rushed into his mind like a torrent. It caused his mind to feel dizzy once more. It's the 8-tailed sky fox. Could it be that my Fox clan bloodline has leveled up? Just as such a thought rose up in his heart, Zhongsho cursed silently. As expected, in the next instance, all around his body, even his meridians, were twitching and wriggling like they were changing. Within his soul ocean, the eight-tailed sky fox and lightning phoenix pretty much merged into one and started to squeeze that ball of flame, trying to swallow it. Zhongshan's heart sank to the bottom. He knew that this was the eight-tailed sky fox and the lightning phoenix. These god-beast bloodlines were working together to squeeze out the part of his body that belonged to the human race. The two of them were already fighting to the death. The foundations of his world's shocking spiritual art were also shaking. Zhongshan didn't bother about the intense pain that spread out from his four limbs. He tried his best to suppress the bloodline swallowing, but the effect was minuscule. Slowly, even the eight-tailed sky fox and lightning phoenix weren't calm anymore. Between them, they started to fight. He could only laugh bitterly. Who would have thought that it was just forming these 8 true spiritual talismans? Such a change would actually occur in this place. However, in the next instance, just as the fire element true chi in his dual meridians was becoming weaker and weaker, suddenly, a vast flame current rose up from within his body, like magma sweeping all about. The flames burning above his soul ocean were also extremely bright. It actually went up against the pressure of the lightning phoenix and the eight-tailed sky fox and wasn't at a disadvantage. Similarly, a huge amount of information charged into Zhongshan's soul. However, it was even more vast, charging over like a giant hammer, smashing into him, making him dizzy. The lightning phoenix followed closely behind, like it was the last straw that broke the camel's back, causing Zhongshan to lose consciousness all of a sudden. When he came back to his senses, luckily, his soul ocean didn't explode and his body didn't shatter like he had expected. Zhongshan heaved a sigh of relief and looked at his soul, only to see that his soul ocean had calmed down. Above the whirlpool, be it the eight-tailed sky fox or the lightning phoenix, they were both becoming clearer and clearer. In fact, he could even faintly see the internal structure of the crystal ball. Zhongshan's spiritual sense landed on the flames as he entered deep thought. This was the Liu family's sky-burning blood, dominating 800 worlds. Who knows what kind of glorious aristocratic family it was to have such a domineering and strong bloodline. Just at this moment, just the tip of the iceberg could suppress the lightning phoenix and the eight-tailed sky fox, which weren't low-grade. Even though he hadn't obtained the true legacy of these two, if this went on, when the sky-burning blood fully awakened, he wouldn't be able to suppress it. Taking in a deep breath, Zhongshan calmed himself down. To solve the threat of the sky-burning blood, it seemed like he had to merge in another god-beast legacy. Moreover, it had to be a true water element bloodline to be able to balance it out. He had the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique, so this wasn't difficult. What was difficult was finding a suitable water element god-beast. This matter needed to be done quickly. He could feel that the sky-burning blood was crazily accumulating energy. This time, due to the sky fox and lightning phoenix suppressing it, it was forced to advance. When it exploded out next time, it would definitely be extremely strong. Moreover, the time wouldn't be too far away. It would probably be when he was prepared to break through to grade 7. Oh, what is this? Suddenly, an inexplicable stream of consciousness flowed through his spiritual sense. Zhongshan's heart moved slightly as he grabbed it tightly. Then, his expression became really interesting. This was his own comprehension of the illusionary technique, as well as a few methods to use it. However, in his memory, he remembered that he didn't learn these abilities. In the next instance, Zhongshan thought back to the eight-tailed sky fox, the flame, as well as the lightning phoenix image which injected information into his brain. I've read in books that some humans have special bloodlines, Nie Tian said. After strengthening the bloodline to a certain level, they would obtain the bloodline legacy. It was the same within the monster race. Could it be that this inexplicable information was the inherited memory? If that is the case, then it is a blessing in disguise. Zhongshan searched carefully within his mind. As expected, he found many. They were all scattered, sometimes not forming into a system. However, sometimes they could merge with one another like a puzzle, slowly completing it. Not only the illusion spell, But the Thunder Phoenix and the Lu family Sky Burning Blood also had a few bloodline-related spells. The latter even had a few fire element spells in his mind. Although they were all basic parts, their grades were all really high. Zhongsho took in a deep breath, only feeling that although his soul had gone through a change, he wasn't tired at all. However, he wasn't tired at all. Instead, he was full of energy. His soul, was also filled to the brim. Compared to before, it had expanded by quite a bit. He didn't hesitate, drawing out threads of soul power and spiritual energy from the whirlpool. True spiritual charms formed up one by one, like it was effortless. Often, in just a dozen breaths, one was formed. 15 minutes later, an illusion word true talisman rose into the air like the sun rising from the soul ocean, lining up beside the stack word true talisman. It caused the soul power whirlpool to expand once more. The space within his soul was filled with wind and lightning. The soul power within his soul was originally refined by him daily using the sky mirror soul shining technique until it was extremely pure. A portion of it had even turned from yin to yang. At this moment, it couldn't be stopped. A large portion of his soul was changing from yin to yang. Zhongsho still wasn't willing to stop. That fire word, true spiritual talisman, was also changing. In just a moment, it was above. The corresponding fire word, heavenly talisman spirit seed, was pulled down and merged into it. In just a moment, there were differences. More spiritual patterns formed and filled within. There were also more spiritual patterns that spread throughout this soul ocean space. The quality of the fire element spiritual vein was also crazily increasing. That lightning word, true spiritual talisman, was also changing. Although it wasn't like the fire word which started to change, it was still expanding. The true spiritual talisman that was formed expanded by several times. Who knows how many hours passed before the changes in the soul ocean whirlpool slowly calmed down. When Zhongsho's consciousness slowly woke up, he saw that it was already noon outside the window. However, he didn't feel dejected because he missed the spiritual cultivation lesson today. Instead, he was delighted. At this moment, 9 true spiritual talismans were formed in his soul. One fire word god talisman was even higher up. Today, he had 9 returning to yang talismans. Peak grade 6. Chapter 401. With a thought, the divine soul left the back of his head. At this moment, it wasn't a ball of yin mist, but it gathered into a ball, like a slowly rotating circular whirlpool. When it flew out of the room, lightning flashed around its body. Even with the blazing sun in the sky, it didn't fear anything. At the return to Sun Realm, even if it was the 15th of the month when the moon was in the sky, one could roam freely. Even in the morning or evening, when the sunlight was weak, one could leave the body. Yang energy had appeared within the soul. From now on, it wouldn't be burned by the sun-true flame. Zhongsho's soul was a little different. When he started to cultivate, he used the sky mirror soul shining technique to train it. After the purify word true talisman was formed at every moment, it would purify and remove the impurities within. It caused his soul to be unusually pure. Although he was at the peak of the return to Sun Realm, the yang energy in his soul was no weaker than a day wandering realm. Using the lightning around his body to cover, even under the blazing sun, he would be perfectly fine. However, at this moment, Zhongsho's heart jumped, and for some reason, he felt uneasy. He felt that his soul was following some kind of inertia and was being swept by the whirlpool. The heaven and earth spiritual energy within 1,000 feet could be absorbed by him. It was still okay now, but in the future when he needed to form a soul body and form a true image, what would he do? With the heaven swallowing energy conversion technique as the foundation, how would the soul ocean whirlpool change? All of his soul awareness returned to his fleshly body like a tidal wave. Zhongsho opened his eyes. First, he frowned. Then, the worry on his face calmed down. A small flame suddenly lit up in his right hand. The flame, which was less than a finger, burned in the air. Although the flame was small, It caused the air within 100 feet to ripple. All the spiritual energy was disintegrating and giving out exploding sounds. In just a blink of an eye, it caused the space within the room to intensely climb. If it wasn't for Zhongsho using his spiritual power to suppress it, the entire room would have collapsed. The entire courtyard was nearly about to spontaneously combust without a flame. Zhongsho's eyes were filled with shock. This was one of the abilities that the Liu family Sky-Burning Blood gave birth to, Sky-Burning Flame. Originally, he didn't pay much attention to it. However, looking at this power, it was already above the level of normal flames. After thinking for a while, Zhongsho suddenly had a small purple lightning ball appear in the flame in his hand. The method he used was the mystery of the stack word. He still wasn't able to stack spells with one another. However, with his bloodline ability, he was able to easily stack two totally different abilities. When the fire and lightning came together, the flame immediately changed. It was as if a chemical reaction had taken place. It expanded crazily, and its color turned pure black. Zhongsho's pupil shrank. Almost immediately, he threw the ball of thunder fire out of the window. In that direction, there was an open space with a radius of 1,000 feet. It was also allocated to this courtyard for him to practice martial arts. A few days ago, Zhongsho had reinforced and modified it with a spiritual array, which could suppress the amplitude of spiritual energy. However, at this moment, when the ball of flames exploded, the spirit array there immediately collapsed. Everything was burning crazily. A purple lightning glow shone and spread in all directions. It brought with it the power of destruction, smashing everything it touched into dust. Luckily, the black flames didn't have the support of his soul power and didn't continue to spread. In just a moment, it all dissipated. However, at this moment, a giant hole appeared in front of Zhongsho's eyes. Inside was burning hot magma flowing. Who knows how many 100 feet deep it was. As for the range, it had also expanded to a distance of several 100 feet. Not only was the house that Zhongsho was standing in destroyed, but the surrounding courtyard walls also disappeared and turned to dust. Luckily, there was no one living in the few courtyards nearby. Be it the black flames exploding or the lightning sweeping everything, there was no sound at all. There were also no spiritual energy disturbances. Pretty much all the heaven and earth spiritual energy that it came into contact with was destroyed in that moment. The entire process didn't alert anyone. Zhongsho took in a deep breath, looking at his hands in disbelief. It was hard to believe that the strike that could compare to a day-wandering realm spell was actually from his hands. Half a day later, Zhongsho slightly waved his hand. Instantly, a cloud formed above the small courtyard. Threads of rain fell down, causing the ground that was burnt into magma to swiftly cool down. His hands formed a seal, and he chanted out a spiritual chant, saying the word rise. In all directions, the walls that were turned to dust rose up from the ground once more. Pretty much every pattern, every crack was the same as before. Behind it was the houses in the courtyard, which were all constructed one by one. This was the stone construction technique of spells, mostly used to lay out formations. Although Zhongsho didn't form earth talismans with his realm, using this technique to rebuild this broken courtyard was really easy. In just a moment, first courtyard returned to normal. However, the furniture, as well as the fire goose feathers used to cushion the bed, Zhongsho was unable to restore them. When Chu Shui returns, she will probably be furious. Looking at the empty room, Zhongsho couldn't help but sigh bitterly. The price he paid to test out the stacking technique was so huge that even he felt pained. A total of 1,500 grade 4 beast crystals evaporated just like that. Speaking of which, Chu Shui, that brat, was about to return. Tilting his head and thinking about it, Zhongsho decided to avoid it and leave the scene first. Leaving the first courtyard A, Zhongsho headed towards the book hiding hall B. Probably only that old man could give him an answer to the changes in his soul. Even if senior brother Han wasn't clear, he could help him contact the few Saint Realm experts in the sect. Those 12 book hiding halls were at the southernmost part of the Common People Palace and coincidentally, one had to pass a few scripture halls. Walking along the corridor, one could see that everywhere was filled with beauties, red flowers, green willows, and a fragrant wind. Many celestial-looking people stood tall and straight, each with their own charm. Song Xingdao's 3 sects and 6 schools were said to be passed down by Shizi's close female friends, which was why the female disciples took up close to 70% of the sect. All of them were extraordinarily beautiful. Even the most ordinary of them could be considered rare beauties in the outside world. Along the way, Zhongsho was able to feast his eyes. This could be considered the only benefit he got from joining Song Shangdao apart from the mysterious Golden Life book. On the surface, he acted like a gentleman, not looking sideways. His eyes scanned the area. With his experience, he could instantly figure out the 3 measurements of her body. He sighed once more. Compared to this Song Xingdao, those beauty pageants in the future were all trash. It was a pity that he was already taken, so he could only look at the flowers and sigh, enjoying the pleasure of his eyes. His heart suddenly rippled. In his mind, that cold body that he had been thinking about for a long time appeared once more. All the random thoughts in Zhong Shoshin's mind instantly disappeared. A lonely expression appeared on his face. That girl's image appeared more and more frequently. Even in his dreams, he would dream of her. He wanted to forget, but he was unable to do so. He always felt sorry for Irin, but in his mind, there was always another voice saying that if he forgot about her, then in this world, who would remember her? His eyes slowly lost focus, and he was at a loss. He could only instinctively walk forwards. Until a few flirtatious laughter spread into his ears did he come back to his senses. Looking around, he noticed that at this moment, he had unknowingly walked into an exceptionally beautiful flower bush. There were 3 colored flowers all around, giving out a light fragrance. Beside him were still beauties. However, at this moment, it was a different kind of moving. Their clothing also seemed to have changed, slightly revealing. Their snow-white skin seemed to have a magnetism that attracted his gaze. At this moment, a ball of flame was burning in his stomach. His mind was pretty much totally occupied by an impulse. He wanted to pounce over and push these beauties to the ground. Then, he viciously tore their clothes apart. Zhongsho's brows rose up. The purify and illusion word true talismans in his soul shone brightly. In the blink of an eye, he broke free from the illusion. Illusionary technique? Don't they know that the Zhong family sky, Fox bloodline, can naturally resist illusionary techniques? Then, he looked at the tricolor flower at the side, meaningfully. Not only illusionary techniques, but they also used medicine. He remembered that when he passed by this place yesterday, he hadn't seen such spiritual flowers. It seemed like his fellow sect members couldn't take it anymore. As expected, such bewitching methods most likely came from the Seven Spirits sect. That Song Shengdao branch sect that people called the Beautiful Demon sect. Interesting. A smile appeared at the corner of Zhongsho's lips as he looked around with an admiring gaze. Although the few girls around him were using a secret technique to bewitch him, they themselves weren't trying to flirt or act coquettishly. Each and every action of theirs was filled with elegance. This is the Seven Spirit sect bewitching technique. Not bad, bewitching but not obscene. It is really deep. He instinctively praised. The expressions of the few girls around instantly changed. Zhongsho lightly waved his sleeves, and the 3 colored flowers at the side were smashed into pieces. It turned into dust and enveloped the few female disciples of the Seven Spirits sect. The few girls instinctively wanted to resist, but they felt their bodies go numb. They couldn't help but take in a deep breath, sucking the pollen into their stomachs. In an instant, her face flushed red, and her beautiful eyes were burning with lust. Their eyes were like silk, and their breasts swelled up. Their abdomens were itchy to the bone and extremely empty. They all wanted the guy in front of them, who they hated to hug them and pinch them. Tanshio, always like to give people a taste of their own medicine. This is just a small lesson. I hope the few of you won't take offense in the future. After saying this, Zhongsho didn't have any intentions of leaving these girls behind. He walked toward another place in the garden. Passing through a short forest, he heard a gentle and charming female voice. Chapter 402. Zhongsho was helpless, drawing a talisman in the air. It was a purify word. When Hanfang saw the situation, he understood. He knew that Zhongsho's soul was pure, and this purify word wasn't the main reason. However, this fellow probably had other methods to solve the weakness of the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique. It is actually this talisman. Junior brother really has an amazing idea. When that heaven-swallowing old man disappeared, it was said that due to his true chi being mixed and his soul being tainted, he was close to going crazy. Although that heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique is a special technique of heaven and earth, the backlash is also really huge. After saying a few words, Zhongsho's eyes were filled with impatience. Hanfang also knew that he had gone too far from the topic. He coughed. Then you came this time as a day-wandering realm cultivator. How do you form the body and form the true image? That's right. Zhongsho nodded his head. A serious expression appeared in his eyes. I used the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique as my foundations. If I don't prepare early, it will be tough for me to form the true image, which is why I came to ask senior brother for advice. Hanfang's brows furrowed, and he was in deep thought. He wanted to speak several times, but he took it back. A moment later, his eyes lit up. I can't do anything about this. Looking at your soul, the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique is like your life's ability. Unless you scatter it and reconstruct your soul, it will be impossible. However, if that is the case, not to mention wasting a year of your time, it would also be a waste for the heaven and earth swallowing ability to dissipate. However, if you don't walk the path of body forming and true image, you can learn from the Buddhist faction. Buddhist faction? Zhongsho's brows furrowed, and a shocked expression appeared on his face. It is the Buddhist faction. Hanfang nodded his head and smiled. Our Tsang Xingdao's secret techniques merge the essence of Confucianism and Taoism, which is why we walk the path of body forming and true image. The Buddhist faction is different from us. Their step is to form the Dharma. Zhongsho also knew about this matter. In a last life, he had fought with Buddhist faction disciples. Those Buddhist disciples did indeed cultivate Dharma characteristics first. Therefore, before Taoist spiritualists entered the immortal Tao, they were even more proficient in all sorts of spiritual techniques, controlling spiritual energy and having many different methods. It was really difficult to determine who was better between the two. In the future, everything would return to its origin. Buddhists still needed to condense their true form, while Taoists also needed to condense their Dharma. However, to him, if he walked the path of Dharma idol, it seemed that he could temporarily avoid the difficulty of forming his true form. However, if you really want to condense your Dharma idol, the path you take will be different from others. There was no one to learn from. None of the Dharma idols of the true Buddhas could leave. The few Taoist divine masters also have a different foundation from your heaven-devouring energy conversion technique. This path is tough to walk. Whilst he said that, Hanfang thought back. I remember that there are a few Buddhist faction scriptures in the technique teaching building that might be able to help you. There are a few books in the scripture repository B, such as the True Explanation of the Heavens, Formless Origin, Pearl Formation of the Dharma C, and the Minor Origin Element scripture. They will be beneficial to you. If it doesn't work, you can head to the book hiding building A. However, you'll have to ask junior brother sect leader. Zhongsho's heart sunk. Since Hanfang said that the path was tough, then it would definitely be tough. Following which he bowed solemnly toward Hanfang in gratitude. If it wasn't for this senior brother's guidance, he wouldn't have been able to figure it out in a few years. Hanfang gave out a bitter laugh, waving his sleeves. An external strength lifted up Zhongsho's body. There is no need for that. Actually, I didn't help much. As your senior brother, I am ashamed. Today, I am looking forward to how far this heaven-devouring energy conversion technique, which is comparable to a top technique, will develop in your hands. Although this Dharma of yours is a little difficult, it won't form if it doesn't form. It's fine if you don't form it, but once you do, You will definitely benefit greatly. Zhong Shou smiled, not bothering about Han Feng's words. Even a fool could hear the perfunctory and comforting meaning in Han Feng's words. Today, he didn't have the heart to think about the effects of this dharma, only hoping that he could successfully pass this hurdle. Following Han Feng's guidance, he took out the true explanation of the heavens dharma, formless Yuan Tong, and the other books regarding dharma. He noticed that these few books weren't all Buddhist. There were 1 or 2 Taoist books. For example, formless Yuan Tong, which was a Taoist technique. Who knows which celestial path expert wrote it? After flipping it open, he felt that it was really deep and indiscernible. He could only keep it in his heaven and earth bag and study it at the end. On the other hand, although the words in the books left behind by the Buddhist monks were equally confusing, they were easier to understand. He then looked around to see if there were any classics that could be of help. All of a sudden, his heart skipped a beat. His gaze was fixed on a bookshelf in front of him. At the 6th layer, a golden book suddenly jumped into his eyes. Vairocana Mandala. Vairocana is the meaning of Vairocana in the Buddhist faction, one of the highest Buddhas in the Buddhist faction. Mandala is the gathering of all saints, all merit and virtue. This scripture, when translated, should be called the Vairocana Saint Virtue Scripture. Who knows who wrote it? It is really rare. Zhong Shaoxin felt really weird. What he cultivated was the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique. It could take away the excess and make up for the deficiency. It could take away the deficiency and give the excess. It was a technique that swallowed heaven and earth, even more demonic than the demon path. However, it had nothing to do with this Vairocana. Could he cultivate this Vairocana Dharma? However, the surge of emotions in his heart was real. It seemed like it came from the depths of his soul, the source of his Tao heart. His soul core was warning him for a reason. He must have missed out on something. Vairocana illuminated everything in the world and chased away all darkness. His heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique swallowed everything, turning everything into nothingness. If he could cultivate it, then what was it? Vairocana? Darkness? With a thought, Zhong Shou took the Vairocana mandala in his hands. He could feel that this book could really help him. After which, he searched around but didn't find any books that could move his heart. When he went downstairs, as expected, he saw that Han Feng's face was filled with worry. Zhong Shou sighed, thinking to himself that the words of his senior brother were mostly comforting words. However, in his heart, he didn't take it to heart. At most, he would ask the elders of the sect to help rebuild his soul. This was the benefit of a large sect. With the 9-layer pagoda suppressing, the hole in his soul started to heal. His reliance on the heaven-swallowing energy conversion technique wasn't like before. After saying goodbye to Han Feng, he left the book hiding hall be. Zhong Shou continued to walk towards the south side of the Common People Palace. Within the Common People Path vast habitat, there was a second technique and technique teaching hall. Inside, it stored the true secret techniques of the sect. Like the 12th book hiding hall, although there was a vast ocean of books, tens of millions of classics. However, most of them were just some information, recording the cultivation of the ancestors, their comprehension of the path of heaven and earth, as well as the annotations of the experts of the various sects on some cultivation methods. Then, there were things like pill refinement and artifact crafting. To truly learn secret techniques and spells, one had to go to the second technique and technique teaching hall. There were a total of 5 layers. However, this was the first time Zhong Shou came here. However, the cultivation methods here weren't for nothing. One needed a certain amount of merit. In the words of the God Emperor game of the future, this so-called merit was the contribution points of the sect. It was the same as the merit points he set in Gantian Mountain. Zhong Shou had never come here before, so naturally, he didn't earn any merit. However, when he entered the sect, Wei Su had already passed 3,000 merit points to him. Based on what that senior brother said, this was the limit set by the sect. If he wanted more in the future, he had to earn it himself. At this moment, he felt a little uneasy in his heart. Who knows whether or not his merit points were enough. Stepping into the door, Zhong Shou felt slightly more at ease. On the first layer, There were labels on the bookshelves. Most of them were around 50 points. Looking out, they were all grade 5 Ling Miao cultivation methods. On the second layer, grade 6 pinnacle techniques were just 300 points. As for direct disciple status, there was a 30% discount. The few Buddhist secret techniques related to Dharma that Hanfang handed over were all around grade 7. However, as it belonged to the Buddhist faction, there weren't many people who cultivated in Song Xingdao, which was why it was much cheaper. Zhongsho took all of them and only used half of them. However, he wasn't satisfied. He walked to the highest layer, where there was an invisible barrier. However, Zhongsho took out the token and waved it aside, unobstructed at all. Then, when the 4 bookshelves entered his eyes, his pupils suddenly shrank. As expected, the third layer was grade 7. The fourth layer was grade 8. As for the last level, it was a secret technique above the 9th grade heaven shocking level. The great sky changing meditation art that way Su had taught him was also included in it. Zhongsho looked at the labels below, instantly sucking in a cold breath. 100,000 merit points. He didn't know how he earned this merit points. However, he knew that this was definitely a huge number. Normal Song Shengdao disciples wouldn't be able to amass it in their entire lives. Even someone as strong as Song Shengdao only had 200 books here. What was surprising was that Zhong Yuan was actually here, looking at a spot with a startled expression. Zhongsho didn't have time to ask, looking around. Moments later, his eyes locked onto a similar golden Buddhist scripture. Vajra Regendari, Rulai Heart Mantra. Taking it in his hand, he flipped it. This scripture had a spell restriction and couldn't be opened. However, he could try to read it, only to see that the opening was Vairocana, getting rid of all darkness, shining on all things in the universe, able to nourish all living beings in the world. The light of the sun is indestructible and indestructible, shining on all worlds. There is also getting rid of darkness and shining brightly. The wisdom of Rulai shines everywhere, shining brightly. There is no difference between day and night. The scripture at the back was hidden by spells, and one couldn't see it anymore. Zhongsho's brows furrowed and knew that this was what he needed. Looking below, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Grade 10 Saint Spirit, 5,000 merit points. Chapter 4:03. What a waste. His heart was itching, but Zhongsho knew that his merit points were at least 4,000 away. Song Shengdao's merit points were recorded in his sect keepsake, that illusionary spell token. If he had enough merit points, he just needed to wave it in front of the book, and he would be able to see the contents behind. Sighing in his heart, Zhongsho placed the Vajra Relmdari Rulai mantra back to its original spot. What he hated the most was this kind of person who only allowed him to read a little of the book, making his heart itch. He also felt fortunate that this Buddhist cultivation method wasn't well received within Song Xingdao. The 5th tier was 50 points, the 6th tier was 300 points, the 7th tier was 1,000 points, and the 8th tier was 3,000 points for a Spirit Master cultivation method. Based on the evaluation on the label, this 10th grade Buddhist secret technique was only slightly higher than the 8th grade. Although 5,000 points was a lot, it wasn't as despairing as the Great Sky changing meditation technique, which had 100,000 points. He was also slightly curious as he followed Zhong Yuan's line of sight and looked over, only to see that there was a 10,000 form Lightning Heart Sutra placed there. He knew about this book. It was said that when one cultivated it to a certain realm, one would have a special ability known as 10,000 form lightning. However, what did this Zhong Yuan want this item for? Thinking about it, he asked. Zhongsho casually reached out and flipped this Taoist Spirit Master's secret manual in his hand. However, he could only read 1 or 2 pages. Zhong Yuan, you are prepared to learn this book? Only then did Zhong Yuan come back to his senses, following which he said in surprise, Your Highness is here. Following which he nodded his head slightly. That's right. Didn't Your Highness want me to learn spiritual techniques? These few months I've been working hard to cultivate, but I have made little progress. Till now I have just calmed down. Thinking about it, since I want to learn, I can't be half-baked. If I want to learn, I have to learn it well. When I came to the technique teaching pavilion to search for a suitable cultivation method, I saw this 10,000 form lightning heart sutra. Zhongsho didn't know whether to agree or disagree. Looking at the label once more, it was a 9th rank auxiliary cultivation formula and required 30,000 merit points. The 10,000 transformations Thunder Heart Sutra complemented Zhong Yuan's cultivation technique. However, this 30,000, in addition to his own 5,000, would make a total of 35,000. Xiao Chun did not know where he had obtained so much contribution. As he walked out of the technique imparting pavilion with some annoyance, Zhong's eyes lit up. He saw Zhao Yinran's figure coming over from not far away. Just as he thought to himself, what a coincidence. He wanted to stop this woman and ask her for information. Zhao Yinran had already walked over. I heard from Elder Han of the Tripitaka block that you're here, so I came to look for you. Han Feng guarded the scripture depository bee all day long. However, other than Zhongsho, almost no one in the vast habitat knew his identity as the second-generation successor. They only called him Old Han. At this moment, the expression on Zhao Yinran's face was unusually complicated and ugly. Suddenly, she flipped her palm, and a thin flame rose from her palm. Zhongsho's pupils constricted when he saw that. Although the strength of this flame was not as strong as his sky-burning flame, it was born from the same body and came from the same source. This woman did not have the bloodline of the Liu family. So how could she have it? Was it because of the reverse seed cauldron? There was actually such a god temple that could even obtain such a bloodline ability. In the next moment, he saw Zhao Yinran look over, exchanging glances with him. 2 hours ago, when I was with your maidservant, I fainted for no reason. After I woke up, I noticed that there was something more in my body. I cultivated a true talisman. While speaking, she used her spell power to draw in the air, controlling the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to form a fire word. Zhongsho was envious when he saw that, thinking that this Zhao Yinran was too lucky. The 7-spirit sex cauldron energy seed cauldron was too exquisite. He just had a small breakthrough in his cultivation, and it allowed this woman to benefit so much. A true talisman was enough to cause Zhao Yinran's spiritual cultivation to reach the peak of the return to Sun Realm. The growth of her soul power was definitely huge. However, he didn't lose out. Not long later, he would be able to get Zhao Yinran to repay him. The reverse seed cauldron technique was like that. Both sides could benefit from it. However, the more this woman benefited from him, the harder it would be for her to struggle out of the seed cauldron and break free from his control. Looking at the situation, she was most probably flustered and exasperated. Smiling slightly, Samuraim's eyes were filled with a mysterious expression. One ability, one true talisman. This is a good thing. Why are you so anxious? As expected, it is you. Zhao Yinran's eyes instantly constricted, following which it became darker and darker. You really formed 2 talismans in a day and awakened the Liu family sky-burning bloodline. Zhongsho smiled and didn't reply. Zhao Yinran understood what Zhongsho meant and silently admitted it. She took in a deep breath. It isn't a good thing for your spiritual cultivation to progress too quickly. If you rely on external items, there will be many problems in the future. You are my cauldron, and we are already tied together, one body connected. If something happens to you, it won't be good for me. Zhongsho was speechless, shaking his head once more. Who said that I used external items? Cultivating spiritual cultivation, apart from your spirit seed, I have never used external items. Speaking of which, you lost your composure today. Never using external items, those words weren't empty words. Although there was dragon essence energy, lightning phoenix essence energy, spirit salamander essence blood, most of them were used to strengthen the body. Zhao Yinran let out an ah and went into a daze. Not using external items. How was that possible? How was this Zhongsho able to form 2 talismans in a day without using external items? In other words, the fellow in front of her really didn't use external items and only used 2 years. He climbed from Grade 1 Spirit Master to the peak of Grade 6 Return to Sun Realm. He also awakened the Liu family sky-burning bloodline to such an extent. Suddenly, Zhao Yanran felt regret, only feeling that the mental connection between the two of them was becoming tighter and tighter. The seed in Zhongshu's body was like a dense spiderweb that would tightly wrap around her, such that she wouldn't be able to break free. At the start, although she was filled with fighting spirit, she was a little careless and didn't leave any way out for herself. Forcefully suppressing the shock in her heart, Zhao Yanran also noticed that she was indeed a little abnormal, following which she asked curiously, "Then what is going on with your maidservant?" Although her cultivation isn't much, her intuition during battle is surprisingly strong. Her talisman techniques are a mess, but in terms of the martial path, I can only fight to a standstill with her. Zhongshu smiled. This Zhao Yanran really had a lot of questions today. Have you heard of combat martial body in this world? One sentence caused Zhao Yanran to be distracted once more. Zhongshu was too lazy to continue wasting time with her, directly asking, "Do you know where I, Song Xingdao, can obtain merit points?" Zhao Yanran's eyes were filled with shock. Combat martial body. That was a body in the world that wasn't any weaker than top talents. It was said that such a person's combat intuition was terrifyingly strong. Even during the Cloud Desolate era, it was said to be one of the god bodies. Numerous sects begged for it, but couldn't get it. Speaking of that brat, when he first met her, he noticed some clues. Her intuition was terrifyingly strong. Zhongshu also paid a lot of attention to this girl. Why didn't she notice it in the past? Only when Zhongshu impatiently waved his hand in front of her did she come back to her senses. Thinking back, searching her soul, she remembered what Zhongshu asked just now. It is really easy for me, Song Shengdao, to earn merit points. Helping the sect to kill people and do things will give me a lot of merit points. However, within this vast habitat, it is a little problematic. The first method is to concoct pills and refine equipment. The second method is to teach on behalf of the master, or to help and guide fellow disciples. The last method is to exchange other cultivation methods, secret techniques, or valuable ancient records with the sect. Zhong Shaoxin's heart moved, thinking back to his 9 types of true dragon sword techniques. As a grade 7 cultivation method, it could be exchanged for 1,000 points. There was enough to exchange for 7,000 points. In the next instance, he heard Zhao Yanran say expressionlessly, "There is an even simpler method. Has your highness heard of the World River?" The so-called World River was also known as the Spirit River. It wasn't a true river, but between the space barriers, there was often a huge spiritual wave surging. As the spiritual energy was really abundant, close to condensing into a physical form, which was why it was called the Spirit River. However, such a huge amount of spiritual energy naturally attracted some things. The good and the bad were all gathered in one place. Some special beasts, demons, all sorts of evil and evil beings were mixed within. Some evil beings with special abilities could even forcefully break through the space barriers and enter the cloud world. As for what Zhao Yanran said, the simplest method was to suppress the World River. The sect had special merit missions to stop and kill evil beings. It was said that a grade 6 evil being was worth 100 merit points. Apart from that, one could also obtain various materials through killing various weird beasts and demons. One could use them for oneself, or hand them over to the sect to exchange for merit points. Sometimes, if one was lucky, one could even obtain special treasures from the Spirit River. Song Xingdao had the merit hall. The sect gave out missions, and disciples received their rewards here. Before Zhongshu left, he specially came to this building to take a look and investigate. As expected, there was a mission to suppress the World River. However, to accept this mission, one had to be at least grade 6 peak. Zhongshu and Zhong Yuan met the requirements. However, the rewards were still quite generous. 20 hours, and they could get 100 merit points. At the back, there was a long list of the merit points one could obtain after killing these evil beings. It also recorded the specialties of these evil beings and beasts, the abilities and weaknesses they were good at. There were a total of 4,000 of them. Many of them were question marks and only had pictures. It was obvious that even the people of Tsang Xingdao didn't recognize the background of these evil beings. Zhongsho took a close look several times and memorized all of it. Only then did he set off with Zhong Yuan towards the World River. As long as they walked out from the south of the common people vast habitat, they would be able to reach a place where the space spiritual energy was unusually thick. There were no mountains and no water, only darkness. Their feet were unable to touch the ground, and they could only walk in the air. Zhongsho gathered spiritual energy in his eyes to barely be able to see. However, what he saw was a patch of emptiness. Chapter 404. In this void, there was no up, down, north, south, east, or west. Zhongsho took out a talisman and followed the spiritual light that the talisman turned into, flying forwards in a beautiful trajectory. Zhong Yuan followed closely behind. At this moment, he hadn't broken through to the ascended realm. However, he could naturally float in the void here. Even if he didn't have the ability to fly, he could still step into the void. A moment later, a swish-swish sound suddenly entered their ears. It was like there really was a river flowing in front of them. When they got closer, Zhongsho and Zhong Yuan were stunned on the spot, only to see that in front of them, there were tens of spiritual energy waves of varying sizes gathered here. Even the smallest of them was hundreds of thousands of feet wide and long, turning this space into a sea of spiritual energy. It was incomparably magnificent. Numerous heaven and earth spiritual energy was so thick that one could touch it with their hands. However, it wasn't the rainbow color that Zhongsho imagined, but a deep blue like water, giving off a faint blue light. A portion of the spiritual energy seeped into the void and disappeared. A portion turned and flowed towards the other side. Looking from afar, one could see that there were already more than 200 people present, each occupying an area in the sea of spiritual energy. Most of them were grade 6 peak. There were also tens of grade 7 experts. Their auras were indiscernible. They all looked expressionlessly at Zhongsho, like they were used to seeing Tsang Shengdao's disciples coming in and out of this place. They were only slightly surprised by these two new faces, but they didn't care much about them. This is the spiritual river. Zhong Yuan's brows furrowed, hiding the shock in his eyes. When he was in Gantia Mountain City, he didn't think that there would be such a magical and beautiful place in the cloud world. Zhongsho was in deep thought, thinking back to the rumors about the vast habitats that he had heard in the past. It was said that the 5 vast habitats weren't formed naturally, but were created by end-realm experts during the Cloud Desolate era. They were all built in the most dangerous areas of the cloud world to suppress the spiritual ocean, while absorbing the vast spiritual energy here to maintain the vast habitats. They were constantly at risk. Pretty much every moment, they would face huge dangers. They were also the 5 pillars that supported the cloud world. However, at that time, there were very few people in the God Emperor game who could enter the vast habitats. Even those who had the qualifications to enter and leave kept the situation inside secret. In reality, the 5 vast habitats and 3 heavenly places were high up above, not interacting with the outside world and maintaining a mysterious atmosphere. It seemed like it was most probably true. The blue ocean in front of them was most probably the spiritual ocean. Taking a closer look, there were indeed many creatures mixed in the blue seawater. Most of them were things that they had never seen or heard of before. The surrounding Tsang Shengdao disciples didn't care about whether or not they were evil and whether or not they were a threat. As long as they had some value, they would act kill them. As for those who were too strong, they tried their best not to offend them. If they were willing to follow the spiritual river to escape, they were allowed to do so. If they wanted to stay, they would be surrounded and killed by grade 7 experts. Near the spiritual ocean, there was an invisible barrier. Not only did it restrict the vast spiritual energy in one place, but it also prevented the living beings in the spiritual ocean from entering. Sometimes there would be some black cracks that flashed across. If there was nothing around, then it was okay. If there were beasts or evil spirits that passed, their bodies would be sliced apart, and they would all die on the spot. Zhongsho squinted and looked around. He noticed that the hundreds of Tsang Shengdao disciples were all standing in an exquisite manner. Coincidentally, they were all at the whirlpool formed when the spiritual river gathered. The living beings in the spiritual river, be it beasts or evil spirits, would all be attracted by the whirlpool when they charged into the ocean. This was also the best time to kill these beasts and evil spirits. All of these good places already had owners. Zhongsho thought about it seriously for a moment. He was lazy to mix with his fellow sect members. He directly chose an average-sized spiritual river and went against the flow. With that, the two of them attracted the weird gazes of the many Tsang Shengdao disciples. In the past, there were disciples who chose to go above the spiritual river to hunt. However, they were usually at least grade 7 experts. Although there were grade 8 to 9 common people path experts around the spirit ocean at all times, there were even elders who stepped into the celestial path guarding to defend against the attacks of those fierce, evil demons. There were still a lot of people in the spirit ocean. However, the situation was still extremely dangerous. Most of the people who came to the spirit sea to hunt and gain merit had teamed up with fellow sect members to do so. Like Zhongsho and Zhongsho, their strength was only at the peak of grade 6, and they actually dared to enter the upper stream. To put it nicely, they were ignorant and fearless. To put it bluntly, they were asking to die. However, the two of them still hadn't entered the spiritual river. A woman in a red robe suddenly flashed in front of them. Her looks could only be considered normal in the common people's vast habitat. However, she gave off a heroic aura as she reached out to stop them. I am Xuanya, a 4th-generation disciple of Taishan sect. Our two junior brothers new to the common people's vast habitat. This upper stream is just too dangerous. If you don't have any treasures, it will be tough to resist the spiritual pressure. If you two junior brothers are willing, you can follow us. Hearing the two words Xuanya, Zhongsho was originally a little wary. He thought to himself that she already knew about the 7 spirit sect female disciples and wanted to find trouble with him. When he heard the last few words, he was stunned. This Xuanya actually didn't recognize him. Speaking of which, that girl called Yongqin plotted against him on her own accord. With his doubts solved, the bad feelings he had towards that girl dissipated by half. Thinking about it, the 3 most outstanding disciples of Tsang Shengdao, how could normal people compare to them? Looking at the situation, she probably didn't care about the first courtyard being occupied by him. Looking towards where Xuanya pointed, only to see that it was all girls, pretty much all young and beautiful. Although they weren't as beautiful as Zhao Yanran, they were all rare beauties. Although there weren't any grade 7 out of these 10 people, they formed a formation. Working together to occupy an ocean eye, they were actually able to deal with Yuru. Zhongshoxin's heart was instantly tempted. When hunting evil demons and beasts, to have these beauties by his side to chat, it seemed like it was not bad. However, thinking about it carefully, Zhongsho sighed, cupping his fists toward Xuanya. He brushed past her and continued to head upwards. 35,000 merit points. Killing a level 7 evil spirit would only give him 300 merit points. Mixing with these girls, he might not even be able to gather enough in a year or 2. If he wanted to get the Diamond Realmdari Rulai mantra in his hands, he could only take the risk. Xuanya on the side was stunned once more. It wasn't good for her to stop them. She could only look on as Zhongsho and Xuanya entered the upper stream. Her brows were tightly furrowed, thinking to herself that the two of them were asking to die. Suddenly, he saw 2 people walking over from afar. The teen in the red shirt was his junior sister Chenro. The other was 7 Spirit Sect's senior master Yongqin. He didn't know what had happened, but at that moment, Yongqin's face was flushed red from shyness. Within her eyes, there was even indignation. Only after stepping into the spiritual river did Zhong Shou know what the so-called spiritual pressure was. The more he went against the flow, the thicker the spiritual energy. It was squeezing over from all directions, wanting to charge into his body. The strength his body could take was also increasing. 50,000 kilograms, 150,000 kilograms, 50,000 kilograms. It was increasing step by step. It was pretty much about to cause his body to explode. His martial path cultivation was only at the martial ancestor realm, merging with 5 spiritual veins. His physical body was also strengthened to the extreme in Dragon Gathering Mountain. However, under the spiritual pressure, he still found it really tough. His 4 limbs were restricted and he was unable to move freely. Zhong Yuan at the side had a solemn expression. There is actually such a place in this world. If there weren't these evil beings and beasts, it would be a great place to cultivate. Just as they were speaking, a black shadow that was swimming not far away suddenly pounced over. It looked like an octopus, and its large eyes opened. Immediately, countless dark green threads wrapped around them from all directions. However, before it got close, Zhong Yuan's spear image exploded out. Thousands of purple blade images brought with them vast lightning power, smashing those threads into pieces. He scoffed, taking out a short spear from his heaven and earth bag and tossing it out. Lightning flashed, that short spear under the acceleration of numerous magnetic storms. Even Zhong Shou couldn't see it clearly. It directly pierced that octopus-like black shadow with one spear, along with the purple lightning on the short spear exploding out once more, flowing all about. The black shadow let out a miserable shriek as its enormous body crumbled into pieces. Zhong Shou's brows furrowed, surprise flashing across his eyes. He knew that 2 months ago, Zhong Yuan seemed to have obtained many good things in Dragon Gathering Mountain, along with the rewards and salary he received from him these 2 years. His wealth was considered really rich in the same grade. However, he didn't expect that this fellow would actually craft such a short spear without making a sound. Grade 3 spiritual artifact, using the lightning power in its body to push it. Even some peak grade 6 beasts could be instantly killed. He waved his sleeves and took out the item that the black shadow left behind. Thinking about it carefully, he knew where this item came from. It should be a grade 6 evil spirit, 1,000-thread dark demon. What he held in his hand was a grade 6 evil crystal. Cultivators could also use it, but if one wasn't a demon path cultivator, one needed to purify it. Its value was probably lower than beast crystals. Using this item to hand it over to the sect, one could get 50 merit points. If he wanted 35,000 evil spirits, he would need 700 evil spirits of this level. Sighing once more, Zhong Shou waved his hand and summoned out the 7-star spell altar. The 2 of them stepped on it together and continued to head upstream. To be continued. Chapter 405. Within this world wall space, there was no sense of distance at all. He had walked thousands of feet forward, but when he looked back, he had only taken 1 step. Sometimes, when he only walked 10 feet forward, he was already 1,000 feet away from his original position. He noticed that this spiritual river had several forks. A portion of the river water flowed to other places. Naturally, it included some beasts, evil spirits, and demons in the spiritual river. Within this spiritual energy river, it wasn't totally smooth. There were numerous layers of invisible barriers blocking, causing some grade 8 and above beasts and evil beings to be unable to enter. Even grade 8 and below would occasionally have a portion of luck. No matter whether it was good or bad, they could only pass through the gaps of the invisible barriers and enter along the spiritual river. Legend had it that in the early years of the Cloud Desolate era, a huge battle caused the Cloud World to be riddled with holes, which was why there were 5 Cloud World End Realm experts who built these 5 vast habitats, each of them suppressing an area and becoming the barriers of a world. This legend is most probably true. Zhong Shou's mind was filled with random thoughts as he looked around, until he saw another fork in the distance. However, it wasn't a split, but a few surging spiritual rivers gathered together. Only then did he stabilize the seven-star spell altar. Its position was coincidentally above a whirlpool formed by the spiritual wave gathering. It is here. If we continue forward, it should be the World Abyss. World Abyss? Zhong Yuan's brows rose up. He had never heard of this name before. Zhong Shou didn't explain. He had never come to that spiritual river before, but he was really familiar with this World Abyss. In the future, if one didn't reach the celestial martial realm and want to go to other worlds, one could only drive a spiritual boat and start from this World Abyss. One World Abyss connected to tens of worlds. He had entered and exited tens of times. Sometimes it was purely for tourism to visit other worlds. Sometimes to avoid enemies. He had no choice but to leave the cloud world, which was why, although he didn't know that place like the back of his hand, he was familiar with it. He knew that in this era, there should be numerous strong, evil beings there. It wasn't something the current him could deal with. The moment the spell altar was fixed, numerous spiritual veins gathered and were led into the altar. The richness of the spiritual energy within the spirit river was something that even the vast habitat couldn't compare to. At this moment, after being hit by the formation on the spell altar, Zhong Shou instantly felt that his soul power could move numerous amounts of spiritual energy. It was as if he himself was the god of this place, and his strength had increased exponentially. Knowing that it was just an illusion caused by the dense spiritual energy, Zhong Shou didn't care much about it. He waved his sleeves casually, and the few spiritual pets that he carried with him all flew out. The thunder-winged flood dragon and little gold were directly attached to his body. When the demonized silver bear didn't need to show itself, it would transform into a soul stone. As for the rising moon lion, it was hidden in a pouch on his body. This was something he obtained from Taoist ant as well, and it was a type within the small universe pouch called the spirit beast pouch. It was also made from the skin of a beast that had both time and space abilities at the same time. Although the value of the materials used was much higher, there was only a space of 1,000 feet inside. However, this spirit beast pouch not only could dead things enter, but living things could also enter and exit the space, and even cultivate within. That Taoist ant brought 2 of them to carry his demon fire crystal ants across the cloud ocean, rushing from the central continent to Donglin. When Zhong Shou took it, there were thousands of demon fire crystal ants within. Although the ant queen was dead, these ants were still alive and kicking. Just cleaning them took him a lot of effort. Near this whirlpool, there were also many beasts and evil spirits that were attracted by the whirlpool. Zhong Shou looked around, and then his eyes lit up. Not far away, there was a grade 7 snow spirit whale, which was following the spirit river as it charged down. He knew that such a being had a huge body, but its combat strength could only be considered normal. They only relied on their strong physical bodies to bully their own kind. As for those strong and fast elite beasts that were smaller in size, they were basically helpless against them. However, its entire body was filled with treasures. Just one, its value could be compared to 4 grade 7 beasts. Zhong Shaoxin was secretly delighted, forgetting that he was only at grade 6 spirit realm, the peak of return to Sunday. With a thought, that giant lightning flood serpent directly charged up. Before this, in the battle with the demon fire crystal ant, this lightning flood serpent was restricted from start to finish and was unable to go all out. At this moment, power was going all out. Thousands of feet of purple lightning shot out from his body. Some grade 5 and grade 6 beasts around were numbed by the ripples of the lightning, unable to move. There were even some that died on the spot. Then there was a thunder roar, and the surrounding spiritual energy all rolled intensely. The lightning-winged flood serpent and that giant snow spirit whale clashed together. The former directly flew backward. The flood dragon's soul retracted back into its body. As for the small lightning-winged flood serpent, which was less than 120 feet long, its eyes were blurry, golden stars shining. The giant snow spirit whale was totally fine, standing still on the spot. Only its mind seemed to have fainted due to the purple lightning striking it. It was also at this moment that the demon-eyed silver bear suddenly let out a wild roar. 3 silver glows shot out from its brow, striking at the same spot, directly piercing a giant blood hole in the head of the giant snow spirit whale. That giant snow spirit whale was startled awake, furiously twisting its body and smashing towards the 7-star spell altar. A flickering rising moon lion suddenly appeared under its stomach, a pair of sharp claws slashing out, opening a shocking blood hole on its stomach, directly striking where the giant whale's heart was. This rising moon lion Little G had relied on the spiritual salamander blood a month ago to strengthen its body to grade 5 realm. After Zhongsho, he decided to drip those few drops of mysterious dragon blood into its body. However, the path this rising moon lion chose wasn't to merge, but to swallow like little gold. At this moment, it wasn't completed, but its body was like a shadow and mist. The ability of the rising moon lion was becoming more and more exquisite. It was like a strong assassin. When it was hiding, it was hard to find traces of it. The moment it appeared, it would be a fatal strike that would kill it in one strike. The lion claws waved like a giant chisel, digging deep into the body of the snow spirit whale. The latter was astonished, shaking its body to toss the rising moon lion out. Following which it hollered out, numerous ice arrows gathered in the air and shot towards the rising moon lion. Zhongsho's eyes squinted as he pulled out his sword. Xian Gold Long Ing appeared behind him. An extremely sharp white sword light also appeared in the air. With just a flash, it shattered the tens of thousands of ice arrows. It scoffed, fresh blood seeping out from the corner of its lips. Zhong Yuan. Without needing him to instruct, Zhong Yuan charged up into the air. A purple spear shadow pierced through the air. First, hundreds of feet of purple lightning exploded out, following which it retracted into a single point. It was like it couldn't return, going all out. In the next instance, this spiritual river was covered in a blood glow, and a painful cry broke out. Zhong Yuan struck in from the wound that the demon-eyed silver bear had created with the gung metal flying shuttle, causing the wound to expand once more, directly striking its brain. This giant whale was already in a frenzy. At this moment, Zhongsho's lightning-winged flood dragon had recovered, once again transforming into its dragon soul body and smashing over. Zhong Shoxin relaxed, knowing that after this battle, he would obtain at least 1,400 merit points. The snow spirit whale wasn't an evil being, and after killing it, one wouldn't be able to obtain merit points. However, one could use the items in its body to exchange for merit points. Also, the whale oil within the snow spirit whale could be used to make snow spirit ambergris. The effect was several times stronger than the best purple sandalwood. Be it to fight or to cultivate, it was great. However, at this moment, he couldn't feel happy. Within his body, vital energy surged. When he had slashed apart those ice arrows and saved the rising moon lion, the huge recoil had directly injured his body. Without being able to borrow the strength of Wei Su, without the protection of Old Man Long Ying, he was actually so weak in front of a true grade 7 beast. He had overestimated himself. It wouldn't be easy to obtain those 35,000 merit points. He had a lightning-winged flood dragon that was at least 2 times stronger than this snow spirit whale. But he still had to pay such a price to kill this grade 7 beast that was full of weaknesses. As for the other stronger beasts and evil beings, he didn't dare to imagine. However, this place seemed to be an excellent place to practice his swordsmanship. Zhongsho held the fire-een sword in his hand, the glow in his eyes slowly retreating. Instead, it was filled with fighting spirit. At the end of this spiritual river, within the spiritual ocean where dozens of huge spiritual waves gathered, Xuanya's brows were tightly furrowed, revealing a look of rage, which means that you all failed to plot against him and were instead taught a lesson by him. That person will give you a taste of your own medicine. He used the 3-colored heart charming grass to charm all your senior sisters. Seeing Yongqin and Shinro in front of her, Their faces were filled with embarrassment. Xuanya couldn't help but rub her brow with a headache. After a short while, Yongqin muttered, "We are just feeling unjust for junior niece Xuanya. Xuanya's talent and character. Who doesn't know about the 3 sects and 6 schools of Song Xingdao? Who doesn't respect her? Those elders just couldn't see it. They just let a stinky baby stay there. A 15-year-old kid. What right does he have to become the first seat of our Song Xingdao? Even those 2 pigs, Xie and Luosher, are better than him." She viciously clenched her fists and said hatefully, "That person is too despicable. Doesn't he know that our 7 spirit sect disciples are most afraid of the emotions and desires tribulation? Once we are tempted, can't we stop? It's okay if he used the 3-colored heart-charming grass on them. But he just left without a care. How despicable. He obviously wants to torture them." When Xuanya heard that, she helplessly shook her head. Then, he suddenly knocked on Yongqin's forehead. Chapter 406. You all asked for it. How can you blame others? You all can teach him a lesson. Why can't others teach you a lesson? Yongqin exclaimed as she hugged her head. Thinking to herself that her senior master was hit by her like that, she really lost face. Following which she heard Xuanya scoff coldly. "I think you all deserve it. Xuanya naturally has her own way to deal with the chief-disciple battle. Why do I need you all to interfere? Moreover, this method is too despicable. When facing an enemy, one naturally has to be unscrupulous, no matter how despicable it is. However, if one uses it to deal with fellow sect members, it is a little too much." Yongqin rolled her eyes disapprovingly, seeing Xuanya clench her fist and was about to strike over. She quickly dodged. "Don't hit me. I am your senior master. When the time comes, I will sue you for disrespecting your elders." When Xuanya heard that, she was both annoyed and amused. In the end, she retracted her fist, following which she had an idea, reaching out and grabbing Yongqin in front of her. She didn't care that they were in public, directly slicing open Yongqin's clothes, only to see between her breasts. There was a bright-colored rose drawn on it. In her memory, it was in the shape of a flower bud, but now it had bloomed. Xuanya's expression turned solemn. "The spiritual flower just bloomed. What did he do to you?" Yongqin's face flushed red, stammering but unable to say anything. Was she supposed to tell Xuanya that she fell for his illusionary technique? In the end, that evil brat turned into several copies of himself in her dream, and then did those shameful things with her in her dream. Front, back, up, down, left, right, pincer. She tried all sorts of positions. She didn't say anything, but Shinro covered her mouth with her hand and laughed softly. "I don't know about that either. I only know that when China used her charming spirit technique, that Tanshio also used an illusion to seal her. After which she became weird. Not only was she unwilling when she woke up, but her clothes were also wet. If it wasn't for her needing to wash up and change, she wouldn't have dragged on till now." As she said that, Yongqin stared furiously at her. Shinro didn't care at all, instead looking over in a provocative manner. Xuanya sighed. She had already expected it. She closed Yongqin's clothes and said, "Meditate for a while. It should be fine. In the end, today's matter is still your fault. Since this person claims to be Song Shengdao's 3rd-generation true disciple, then why is he so arrogant? If he's not lying, then he's our martial grand uncle, and we can't disrespect him. In a few days, let's go find Tan Xiao and apologize together." To be more precise, she was their Great 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 great. Although Xuanya was a fourth-generation disciple of Tai Yuan's sect, it was actually the current system of the sect. On the token was the eighth-generation disciple of Tai Yuan's sect. This person's seniority was really extraordinarily high. Her brows rose up, following which a sharp glow appeared in her eyes. I thought that he was young and didn't want to find trouble with him. But now that this person had such ability, he was at ease. When he breaks through to Tier 7, Xianyu will naturally come knocking on his door to have a battle with him and contend for the position of head disciple. She looked warningly at the two girls. You are not allowed to play any tricks. I, Xuanya, am open and upright. Even if I want to win, I don't care. Before her words landed, she heard the sounds of discussion behind her. Xuanya turned her head, only to see the 10 over senior and junior sisters who occupied an ocean eye all frowning. Xuanya was shocked, abandoning the two girls in front of her and walking over. What happened? Junior sister Xuanya. One of the 20 over female raised her head, her face filled with shock and uncertainty as she pointed at a spiritual river. That direction, there haven't been any Tier 7 and above beasts coming over for a long time. Those around Tier 6 have also decreased by a lot. Xuanya was startled, looking over with a lost expression. Wasn't this spiritual river the direction that the two of them left in? Just two Tier 6, and they actually had such ability? Was this a coincidence, or was it done by the two of them? Half a day later, Zhongshu was panting, powerlessly sitting on the 7-star spell altar. Not only him, but the lightning-winged flood serpent that was originally full of energy and showing off its might was also dispirited. It coiled its body on the altar and wasn't willing to get up anymore. As for the rising moon lion, it couldn't take it anymore. It was already paralyzed, spitting out white foam from its mouth. Its expression was like it was already dead, and Master didn't need to order it around anymore. As for the demon-eye silver bear, it couldn't even maintain its body. Although the spiritual energy here was abundant, the soul power and true qi were limited. Only Zongyuan's face was as per normal. Even if his eyes showed signs of exhaustion, his body was still as straight as a spear. Ruler, this place is dangerous. There is no point in staying here. It is best if we return. Zhongshu was a little speechless as he looked in front of him. Those were the materials he kept, as well as the demon crystals and evil crystals. 8 hours, 3 Tier 7 beasts, 6 Tier 6 evil demons. This was his battle record. A total of 2,130 merit points. Apart from the first time when he killed the Cloud Ocean Whale, which was considered smooth. After that, his luck wasn't good. In the battle with the Tier 7 beasts, 4 of them turned around and fled. The other 3 were careless and destroyed all the precious spiritual materials on the bodies of the elite beasts. The value added together wasn't even half of the Cloud Ocean Whale's corpse. As for the evil demons that could be exchanged for merit points, they were much harder to deal with than these Tier 7 beasts. Most of them had close to formless bodies. Their movement techniques were outstanding. Once they saw that something was wrong, they would flee, making the two of them sigh. After 8 hours of battle, the two of them and 4 beasts had used up most of their energy. At this moment, even a few Tier 6 beasts could show off their strength at the side. If it wasn't for the flying leaf sword formation protecting outside of the spell altar, they would have broken in. Zhongshu took out a spiritual pill to recover energy and placed it in his mouth. However, during these few hours, he and Zongyuan had treated such pills like jelly beans, and they were already ineffective. Actually, his body was really weak, and after fighting for a while, he would need a rest. He was relying on Zongyuan to be the main force. He knew that at this moment, it was best to leave, in case they were surrounded and attacked. However, in his heart, he was really unwilling. Only 2,000 merit points a day. To get 35,000, wouldn't it take tens of days? Moreover, tomorrow they might not have the luck to bump into the snow spirit whale. Zhong Yuan looked at his expression and knew what Zhongsho was thinking. He shook his head. The spiritual energy here is too thick. The abilities of these beasts and evil demons are 120% power. Their self-healing ability is also 10 times stronger than normal. Let's go back first and think of a plan. Actually, Zhong Yuan isn't in a rush. We don't need that 10,000 form mysterious lightning heart sutra. Zhongsho laughed bitterly when he heard that. How would he not know that this was the heaven of those beasts? Their combat strength could at least increase by 50%. Thoughts of retreating rose up in his heart. Looking in front of him, there were tens of beasts and evil beings flowing past. However, he didn't have the strength to hunt and kill them. If he knew that this would happen, he would have brought Ruoxue over. However, although Ruoxue was tier 7, her path was similar to that of the rising moon lion. She was like an assassin, killing in one strike. She probably wouldn't be of much use. Thinking about how, if his Gantian mountain army was here, it would be easy to gather 35,000 merit points. At this moment, he was really envious of that ant Shinran. He had an army of 100,000, which was enough to wipe out this spiritual river. Thinking about that, Zhongsho's heart moved slightly as he looked around. Is this environment the will of the heavens? His right hand reached into the heaven and earth bag. Not long later, he took out a purple gold ant egg. Who knows if it was because it had merged with that drop of spiritual salamander blood, but this ant queen egg had become smaller and smaller since that day. Now it was only the size of a fist. Its color also became like that. Who knows what kind of monster it had become inside? While thinking about that, he placed the purple gold ant egg in front of him. Zhongsho first cut open his finger and dripped some blood on it. He didn't mind drawing it according to the most detailed and complicated spirit contract heart locking formation. Then, he was still worried, taking out a silver-white talisman and pasting it on. Taishin heart locking soul settling talisman. It was a celestial talisman that he obtained from venerable Xuanlong's items. During these days, Zhongsho didn't investigate the background of this talisman. However, just from the words heart locking soul settling, he knew the rough use of this talisman. The unknown living being within this ant queen egg would probably be the most unpredictable and dangerous one out of all his spiritual pets and protector beasts. He had to be careful to ensure that nothing would happen. Originally, whether or not the thing within the egg could successfully hatch was unknown. However, since the spiritual energy here was so thick, if he added in that thing, it would most probably succeed. Finally, he took out a small bottle. The moment he opened the cork, he felt a vast dragon aura charge out from within. Zhong Yuan's expression froze. That lightning-winged flood dragon also raised its head, looking warily at the mouth of the bottle. It felt that the thing within came from the same source as it, and was much stronger. However, it didn't seem to have a body and wasn't as strong as it. Zhongsho reached in with his spiritual energy and took out an item. Then, he hurriedly closed the bottle to retract the dragon aura. Then, a drop of blue crystal appeared in his palm. Along with a ball of flame burning in Zhongsho's hand, the blue crystal also started to melt, turning into a ball of liquid, blue, and translucent. Zhong Yuan's brows furrowed, thinking to himself, what exactly was this item? As the crystal melted, a sweet fragrance wafted into his nose. Even he felt a sense of longing at this moment. The surrounding beasts and evil demons all had red eyes as they looked towards the spell altar. They didn't bother about the sword formation as they charged in. This item is the essence of 10,000 bugs. It is said to be the milk spat out by Ying Hua and formed from the essence of 10,000 types of spiritual bugs. It can raise any bug type by 2 to 4 grades. Naturally, it is useful for beasts. Zhong Yuan's expression froze. Ying Hua was said to be the ancestor of the ancient bug beasts. If it was really its milk, it probably had such a miraculous ability. This demon fire crystal ant queen was originally the top spiritual pet protector beast. If it was raised by 2 grades, how strong would it be? Chapter 407. It caused the blue crystal to turn into a spiritual liquid. Zhong then mixed in a few drops of his essence blood and dripped it onto the ant queen eggshell, only to see that the purple gold eggshell instantly gave out a few streaks of light. The blue liquid seeped into the eggshell without any hindrance. Even the heart-locking formation that Zhong drew before was seeped in. Only the Taishian heart-locking soul settling talisman was unable to enter. It was blocked outside by a power within the egg. Zhong scoffed. With a thought, a red flame burned in his palm as he mercilessly tossed it onto the eggshell. The impact of the flame power completely shattered that force. The Taishin heart-locking soul settling talisman also started to burn, turning into a thin blue dot and charging into the eggshell. In the next instance, as Zhong kept the flame, in this space, the spiritual energy that had already condensed into a physical form suddenly surged over. Zhong was prepared. On himself and Zhong Yuan, as well as the protector beasts, he buffed a diamond body protecting talisman. Even the 7-star spell, Altar Below, cut off the tens of spiritual veins that were connected. The beasts and evil demons outside weren't prepared at all and were struck by the vast spiritual energy. Their bodies instantly lost balance. Some of them even had the vital energy in their bodies go berserk. However, Zhong didn't have the time to care about himself. Even the flying leaf sword formation was totally messed up by the spiritual wave. He didn't have the time to bother about the commotion outside of the spell altar. In front of his eyes, the purple gold ant queen egg had already risen into the air and hung in midair. The spiritual veins around were forcefully sucked over and locked onto the fist-sized eggshell. Large amounts of spiritual energy crazily injected in. Within this small space, there were even traces of lightning that were faintly produced, spreading and sweeping in all directions. Zhong also took a few hits. Luckily, he had many talismans on him. Long Ruo and the other 2, along with that grade 7 expert surnamed Li, had hundreds of grade 7 body protecting talismans in their heaven and earth bags. If one was broken, then he would use another one. Not only was he unharmed. On the other side, Zhong Yuan, the lightning-winged flood dragon, and the others looked like they were in a bad state. However, under his protection, they were also fine. On the contrary, the few evil demons without physical bodies were all smashed into dust under the spiritual energy strikes and lightning strikes. However, who knows where the evil crystals that were left behind were swept to by the spiritual wave? Who knows how long had passed when Zhong was a little numb as he opened the 24th grade 7 body protecting talisman. The purple gold ant queen's egg finally stopped swallowing the blood. The surrounding spiritual wave also slowly calmed down. Zhong and Zhong Yuan's eyes flashed as they all looked over. Then they saw the eggshell give out a cracking sound as it finally broke apart. A small thing pierced out from within. However, it wasn't the purple gold that Zhong expected, nor was it the pure black of the demon fire crystal ant. Instead, it was silver white and extremely beautiful. It was totally different from the image of the demon fire crystal ant queen on the ant body. Its body was like that of a human, a total of 6 limbs. The front 2 pairs were extremely sharp blades at the tip. The back pair were like human legs that could stand upright. On its back were 6 pairs of cicada-like transparent wings, looking extremely majestic and solemn. At this moment, Zhong was totally startled. His new protector beast, apart from the 2 pairs of blade limbs, it still maintained the characteristics of the bug race. Its other appearance was similar to a living being known as a featherman that he had seen in another world in his last life. It didn't even have the iconic compound eyes of the bug race. Those 6 pairs of wings lightly flapped. Around its body, there were white flames burning, filled with a pure and holy aura. He He only felt that his brain was a mess, no matter what he couldn't understand. The queen of the demon fire crystal ant, along with the blood of the spirit salamander that was seen as an evil beast, how did it give birth to such a weird living being? It was totally out of his understanding. Zhong Yuan frowned, a hint of disappointment appearing in his eyes. Only grade 6. Any god beast would give birth to a descendant that was at least grade 7. However, Zhong Yuan himself didn't expect this demon fire crystal ant queen to be able to reach the heavens in one step. Only before this ant egg absorbed the souls of 100,000 crystal ants along with the essence of their flesh and blood. Then, it merged with an entire piece of 10,000 bug essence to absorb ocean amounts of heaven and earth spiritual energy. It gave off such a huge aura, but in the end, after breaking out of the shell, it was still grade 6. How disappointing. Zhong Shou slightly shook his head. His expression was really solemn as he looked on carefully. That silver human shape wasn't the size of a normal person, the size of 2 index fingers. Its body was like that of a human female, extremely weak and delicate. Its eyes were tightly shut. Its facial features were like that of a machine, like that of an elf. However, at this moment, for some reason, in his heart, he felt an extremely sharp and fierce intent hidden within that small and thin body. He instinctively felt that something wasn't right. The wariness in his heart rose to the maximum. Just a few breaths later, he saw the human-shaped ant queen suddenly open its eyes. It was a pair of purple gold eyes, filled with sharp, killing intent. With a flash of his body, he charged over like a bolt of lightning. Even Zhong Yuan wasn't able to react before it arrived in front of Zhong Shou. 2 pairs of half-foot-long knives slashed towards Zhong Shou's neck. The diamond body protection technique buffed on his body was like thin paper as it was instantly smashed into pieces by the knife. Samuraim's eyes squinted. He was prepared and wasn't afraid of the sudden assassination of this human-shaped ant queen. The sword in his hand directly slashed out, blocking in front of the 2 pairs of knives. Following which, with a sharp kung, he felt a shocking strength spread over, forcing him back tens of steps and nearly falling off the top of the spell altar. His chest rose up and down, his vital energy surging. Under the impact of that energy, his 9 chakra meridians were nearly shattered inch by inch. Since the human-shaped ant queen's knife didn't succeed, its body flashed once more, turning and charging in the air, avoiding the long spear that Zhong Yuan stabbed out. It once again charged towards Zhong Shou. However, this time, before the human-shaped ant queen got close, it heard Zhong Shou scoff coldly. "Bastard, how dare you?" A soul power fluctuation suddenly spread out from between Zhong Shou's brows. It didn't activate any spiritual energy, just purely covering the area. A talisman also lit up at the center of the human-shaped ant queen's brows, following which its entire body suddenly fell downwards, smashing onto the ground. It was suppressed by Zhong Shou's soul power, firmly locking onto its soul, unable to move at all. At this moment, the few protector beasts beside Zhong Shou all reacted. The lightning-winged flood dragon stretched its head beside Zhong Shou, its eyes filled with killing intent as it stared at the human-shaped ant queen not far away. The rising moon lion and demon-eye silver bear all showed signs of wariness, moving closer to Zhong Shou. Little Gold was the same, but at this moment, it actually left Zhong Shou's arm. It flew into the air, turning into the shape of a dragon. It was like the legendary giant yellow dragon, its entire body an earth yellow color. Its body actually gave out a bit of dragon aura. It made the lightning-winged flood dragon really confused, especially looking at Little Gold, thinking to itself that this fellow was of the same kind as it. When Zhong Shou suppressed the intent of the human-shaped ant queen, only then did he notice the changes in Little Gold. Immediately, he was secretly delighted, but he also felt incomparably surprised. He knew that this fellow's ability to mimic objects had improved to the high grade under the stimulation of the danger just now. It could already mimic living beings. At this moment, the giant yellow dragon that it had transformed into, apart from its body being a little smaller, It could be said to be extremely lifelike. It actually grasped such an ability at the peak of grade 5. He remembered that in the last life, in the hands of that person, Little Gold was only able to mimic the form of a god beast when it reached grade 6. However, at this moment, he didn't have time to carefully observe the changes in Little Gold's body. He only felt that the human-shaped Ant Queen had an unyielding will to resist charging out from within its body, going against the Taishian heart-locking soul, settling talisman at its brow, struggling to break free from Zhongsho's control. On the other side, Zhong Yuan was filled with shock. This little thing is so quick. Is it really grade 6? His Maniac Lightning Spear was originally one of the fastest spear techniques in the world, using lightning and electromagnetism to push it. Within the same grade, there were only a few that could go up against his Maniac Lightning Spear. However, this human-shaped Ant Queen was several times faster than his spear. When it flew, it seemed to have turned into a golden light, such that his eyes were unable to catch sight of it. This speed had far exceeded the level of those grade 7 beasts. Even grade 8 and grade 9 god beasts that were famous for their speed couldn't compare to it. Was this thing really only at the 6th level? What kind of monster was it to be so terrifying? Zhongsho was also filled with doubt, injecting his soul power over to support the talisman to continue suppressing it. On the other hand, he was in deep thought. After a short while, his eyes lit up. It isn't a god beast, but a heaven and earth variant. This Ant Queen should be grade 7 without a doubt, suppressing its own grade. Zhong Yuan's expression was one of shock. He roughly knew what the so-called heaven and earth variant was. It wasn't a god beast, but it wasn't any weaker. Most of them were born from vengeful energy and weren't recognized by heaven and earth. They were envied by the will of heaven, which was why they weren't listed as god beasts. During the Cloud Desolate era, there were rumors of such beasts. They were often unique in heaven and earth, with no others of the same kind. They were accompanied by numerous dangers and killing intents. In their lives, they would kill numerous people. Unless they could grow to a realm above heaven and earth, they would often end up in a tragic state. Naturally, their combat strength far exceeded normal beasts. At this moment, Zhongsho thought back to the 10,000 bug essence that he had seeped into the eggshell. At this moment, even a fool would understand that there was definitely something mysterious within this thing. If not, just the spirit salamander blood and 10,000 ant essence wouldn't be able to achieve such an effect. The only thing he didn't know was where venerable Xianlang obtained those things from. Chapter 408. Being distracted for a moment, Zhongsho dragged his consciousness back to the front of his eyes. That human-shaped Ant Queen was still struggling. A tyrannical and ruthless aura surged out from his body. Zhong shocks inside. Luckily, he was careful. A master recognition spiritual contract and a celestial talisman of unknown grade were actually unable to totally control the mind of this human-shaped Ant Queen. Not only was he unable to get help as he wished, but this new protector beast took up a large portion of his energy. At this moment, if it wasn't for the lightning-winged flood dragon beside him, this grade 7 flood dragon that was close to a god beast, as well as Zhong Yuan protecting him, he wouldn't have been able to escape. At this moment, he could only flee in a haggard manner. Sitting cross-legged once more, Zhongsho formed a seal with his hands, chanting out a special spiritual language. The spiritual contract soul controlling formation hidden within the human-shaped Ant Queen was activated at this moment. Waves of mental energy injected in, scouring the mind of this human-shaped Ant Queen. However, as time went on, Zhongsho's brows furrowed once more as he stopped. The soul of this human-shaped Ant Queen was terrifyingly strong. Zhongsho used the power of his soul to scour. No matter what methods he used, he was unable to shake it at all. He was also unable to invade the mind of this human-shaped Ant Queen. He could only feel that it was ice-cold and silent. Although its body was like that of a winged person, its mind was like that of a crystal ant. That Taishian heart-locking soul, settling talisman, could only invade it bit by bit. At this moment, Zhongsho was truly worried. He could see that this celestial talisman did have a special ability. It was slowly locking down the soul of the human-shaped Ant Queen. However, this needed a certain amount of time. At this moment, if he kept this human-shaped Ant Queen, he wouldn't be at ease. Although he had a few spiritual beast bags beside him, they didn't have any defensive formations. The moment he placed it in, it would charge out. He also didn't have any way to fully control this human-shaped Ant Queen. At this moment, he could only temporarily leave. Once he returned, he would think of a way. If he really couldn't control it, then he could only bear the pain and destroy it. Although this variant of heaven and earth was rare, his own life was 100 times more precious. Keeping a bomb that could explode at any time was tantamount to courting death. He changed his spiritual seal once more. Within Zhongsho's soul ocean, the flame totem suddenly came alive once more. A crimson flame abruptly ignited beneath the human-shaped Ant Queen. It was the burning sky flame of the Liu family bloodline. The humanoid queen calmed down. Even more white flames rose in the surroundings to resist the sky-burning flame. Even though his body was hot, he did not feel uncomfortable at all. His silver carapace did not show any signs of melting. The white flames raged. Although they were at a disadvantage, they were still able to hold on. Zhongsho snorted softly. He had expected that the sky-burning flame would not be able to do anything to it. Then, he flicked his finger and was about to flick out a small purple ball of lightning. Spiritual tattoos suddenly appeared in the purple eyes of the human-shaped Ant Queen, which looked like a weird magic array. It looked at Li Yao along with the Ant Queen's eyes. Zhongsho's eyelids jumped, and he knew that things were bad. He instinctively wanted to close his eyes, but was unable to dodge in time, exchanging glances with it. Following which, he felt a vast spiritual energy charge into his mind like a hot knife through butter. First, he felt dizzy. When Zhongsho came back to his senses, he saw that there was a mark in his soul ocean. Zhongyuan was also shocked by this change. He took several steps forwards and blocked in front of Zhongsho. The purple lightning spear in his hand was pointed at the human-shaped Ant Queen. However, he saw that it did not move at all. It was like an inanimate object, quietly standing within the red sky, burning flames. First, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then, Zhongyuan raised his guard. He still pointed his spear at it, not daring to be distracted as he looked on warily. His mouth was filled with worry as he asked, "Ruler, are you okay?" Zhongsho kept silent and didn't reply, sitting there quietly for a moment. He observed the mark carefully. A moment later, he gave out a bitter laugh. "I'm okay. However, this time, I really spent all day hunting geese. In the end, I got pecked in the eye." After standing up, Zhongsho's expression was really complicated as he looked at the human-shaped Ant Queen, only to see that this beautiful and noble, dreamlike, elf-like being had a cold expression. Its eyes were ice-cold as it stared at him, not giving in at all. Within its purple gold eyes, there was no warmth at all. Just now, it was a spiritual seal, similar to the symbiotic spiritual formation, but also a little different. It should be one of its natural abilities. If it dies, my soul will be heavily injured. However, I can use this spiritual seal to display some of its abilities and even share a portion of its life. Zhongyuan didn't understand. However, when he heard that if this human-shaped Ant Queen died, Zhongsho's soul would also be injured, he finally understood. His eyes lit up as he said, "It's afraid. It's afraid that Jun Shang will kill it, or that Jun Shang is deliberately sending it to its death." As he said that, Zhongyuan took in a deep cold breath. This human-shaped Ant Queen wanted to restrict one another with Zhongsho. Zhongsho could use the Master Recognition Spiritual Contract Formation as well as the Taishian Heart Locking Soul Settling Talisman to restrict this human-shaped Ant Queen. However, this weird being could also rely on the symbiotic spiritual seal to ensure its safety. Zhongsho's brows were tightly furrowed as he rubbed his brows in annoyance. If it was as he expected, That symbiotic spiritual seal should have been passed down from its mother, the result of it living together with that ant generation. Who knows how, but it formed one of the human-shaped ant queen's abilities. What he had a headache about was how to deal with this thing. This symbiotic spiritual seal wasn't something he couldn't solve. However, the price was slightly higher, losing at least 1/6 of his soul power. It would take a few months for him to recover. Interesting, this little thing actually has intellect no weaker than a human. After breaking out of the shell, it immediately attacked. It knew that the Taishian heart-locking soul, settling talisman, and the master recognition spiritual contract would lock down its soul as time went on such that it wouldn't be able to resist. After failing to assassinate Zhongshou and feeling that it couldn't do anything, it changed its method to use this mutual restriction method, such that he couldn't attack it. In terms of intellect, the lightning-winged flood dragon and Little Ji both had decent intellect, similar to an 8-year-old kid, the most innocent type. However, this human-shaped ant queen was different. The moment it was born, it was like an adult. How surprising. Taking in a deep breath, Zhongshou waved his sleeves, dissipating the sky-burning flame. This symbiotic spiritual seal originated from the ant generation's symbiotic formation. Naturally, it wasn't beneficial for spiritual pets and protectors. The natural ability of this human-shaped ant queen was from the same source. If Zhongshou died, it would definitely die too. This was why Zhongshou wasn't afraid that this human-shaped ant queen would suddenly resist and attack him. In the next instant, he saw the purple-gold eyes staring at him once again. Then, the silver-white holy body suddenly flashed. 6 pairs of transparent wings flapped lightly, and it was outside of the spell altar. For knife lights flashed and pierced into the body of a grade 6 demon eye lion. Instantly, blood spurted out. This grade 6 demonic beast was unable to resist at all and was killed. A blood hole was pierced at the center of its brows. That Saint White flame also crazily burned. It actually instantly refined the flesh and blood of the demon eye lion, turning it into threads of milky white essence energy, which merged into that silver-white body. Then, that human-shaped ant queen seemed to have turned into a white light as it circled around the spell altar. Many blood holes were pierced out and many beasts fell on the spot. This was especially the case for the evil spirits and demonic creatures. The burning sacred white flames seemed to be the bane of their existence. Everywhere the white flames passed, the evil demon energy around was instantly wiped out without any suspense. Zhongshou's lips curled up, revealing a mocking intent. After using the symbiotic spiritual seal, was it trying to show its value to him? It was indeed strong, even above his lightning-winged flood dragon. Not only was its movement speed quick, but its silver armor was also really firm. Its 2 pairs of knife arms were no weaker than grade 8 spiritual weapons. His small body also contained a tyrannical strength. Such combat strength could even go up against some grade 8 beasts that were slower. However, if it was just that, it wasn't enough to tempt him. He had many chances to obtain such a strong protector beast in the future. There was no need to take the risk and place a quarter of his soul on the life and death of this human-shaped ant queen. Such a dangerous spiritual pet. Even if it could be compared to a natural protector beast after receiving the symbiotic spiritual seal, he wasn't willing to use it. His heart slowly made up his mind. Zhongshou's gaze became colder and colder. In the next instance, numerous white flames suddenly burned around the human-shaped ant queen's body, sweeping all about. It melted the bodies of the beasts and evil beings that it killed. They turned into streaks of blood-colored essence energy and drew into his body. It didn't even let go of the substance left behind after the fur and armor melted. It seeped into its body bit by bit. Zhongshou's pupils constricted, guessing that this was how this human-shaped ant queen ate. No wonder after it was born, it didn't even have a mouth part. A moment later, he saw the shell at the back of the human-shaped ant queen slowly open up. A ball of silver-white matter was pushed out from within. It continued to grow and separate. When it was 2 feet long, The Ant Queen waved its blade and totally cut off the connection between the two. It was a flying ant, at least it looked a little like the crystal ant from before. However, it was extremely beautiful, a natural body with a sense of beauty. It didn't have the vicious look of the demon fire crystal ant. The silver shell was even more beautiful. There were 4 pairs of transparent cicada wings on its back. It also had 2 pairs of blade arms. Its body was also burning with white flames, only its quality was slightly weaker. Zhongshou and Zhong Yuan instantly exchanged glances with one another, both of them at a loss. A term flashed across their minds at the same time: split reproduction. Moreover, it was born without needing time to incubate, and it would have such strong combat strength. It didn't ask for much. Even if it was half of the Ant Queen's combat strength, it would still be shocking. Chapter 409. A day later, Zhongshou stood on the 7-star spell altar. 5 balls of silver light circled around his body. One of them was the mutated human-shaped Ant Queen, while the other 4 were the 8-winged flying ants that were split off. Their speed was slightly weaker than the former, but they were on the same level as the lightning-winged flood serpent when it flew at full speed. At this moment, in front of Zhongshou, there were dozens of evil demon crystals piled up, amongst which there were 2 grade 7 evil crystals, which were the battle records of the 4 8-winged flying ants of the human-shaped Ant Queen. Just these alone could be exchanged for at least 5,000 merit points. However, at this moment, Zhongshou's attention was more on the mutated Ant Queen. When his spiritual sense reached in, the Ant Queen didn't resist and was finally able to touch a portion of the mutated Ant Queen's thoughts. Grade 7 realm, it can only split into 6. It feels that if it splits out 2 more, it will reach its limit. If it produces more, its grade will drop. However, in the future, every realm it rises, it can increase the number of descendants. Hearing Zhongshou's words, for some reason, Zhong Yuan felt his heart relax. He didn't dare to imagine what the world would become if such a strong being was able to reproduce without a limit. At this moment, although the 4 8-winged Saint Fire Silver ants were only at the peak of grade 6 realm. In terms of combat strength, no one below grade 7 could match them. As for the Ant Queen, it also had several natural abilities buffing it. As long as one was around it, it could be seen as grade 7. In terms of combat strength, it was much stronger than him. Only Zhongshou's lightning-winged flood serpent could go up against it. Zhongshou's face didn't show any disappointment. The living beings in this world followed such laws. The weak ones would have shocking reproductive abilities, like the human race and demon fire crystal ants. As for the strong ones, it would be tough for them to reproduce like those rare god beasts. This mutated silver Ant Queen, even compared to god beasts of the same grade, was really outstanding. The children it gave birth to wouldn't be weak either. A decrease in reproductive ability was something that could be predicted. It was impossible to create another 10,000 ant wave. Then he mocked himself. This mutated Ant Queen really didn't let him down. Just one of them, together with its 6 offspring, was enough to wipe out all of his protector beasts and protectors. As long as he was fine, it was like he had 7 grade 7 experts by his side. Not only did it not disappoint him, but it also gave him a great surprise. With such value, the previous thought of killing him naturally disappeared without a trace. This Ant Queen had indeed displayed enough value. Zhongshou stretched out his hand, and the Saint Fire Ant Queen landed in his palm with a thought. His expression was calm, and one couldn't see any special emotions in his eyes. He stood there quietly, as if he was waiting for his fate. The Taishian heart-locking soul, settling talisman in his forehead was also shining. This was a sign that the immortal talisman had completely seeped into the Ant Queen's soul. Unlike before, Zhongshou had to use all his strength to suppress it. At this moment, he just needed a thought to decide its life and death. Although there was the danger of it biting its master, its strength made it tough for him to give it up, making him unable to make a decision. He frowned and was in deep thought. A moment later, Zhongshou burst out laughing. In his last life, and now, he had gone through numerous life and death battles. Between life and death, he sought the peak of the sword path. Why would he be afraid of a spiritual pet whose soul was already controlled by him biting back? If there was a day when this mutated ant queen succeeded and bit back at him, then Zhongsho deserved it. Why did he need to be so afraid? He didn't hesitate anymore, dripping a bit of essence blood onto its brow. Today, I will give you a true name. Your body has the light flame, born from the demon flame. In the future, you will be called Hanshi, meaning the sunlight that rises at dawn. Samurai's gaze was solemn. This was the first time he gave a proper name to a spiritual pet. As for the Saint Fire Ant Queen, its gaze flickered slightly as it absorbed the essence blood into its body. To beasts, this so-called true name was the same as birth date. The mark and beast crystal merged into the bloodline and connected to the ability. Once other high-grade spirit masters who were good at curses and spells found out, it was the same as controlling its life. Seeing that the sacred Fire Ant Queen didn't resist, only then did Zhongsho smile. When he raised his head, he saw the lightning-winged flood dragon and rising moon lion looking over in envy. Only the demon-eye silver bear didn't react at all. Zhongsho couldn't help but laugh. Little Ji and Little Lei were just code names that he casually gave. He couldn't really use these names as the true names of his protector beasts. On the side of Zhongyuan, he was also surprised. He didn't think that his ruler could give such elegant names. He was really afraid that Zhongsho would give them names like Little Silver and Little White. As the Gantian Mountain Monster King, if people found out, he would be a laughing stock. Just as he placed down his worries, he heard Zhongsho pat the head of the sacred Fire Ant Queen. You can't let people know your true name. Normally, I will call you Little White. Seeing the fierce glow in the eyes of the sacred Fire Ant Queen, Zhongshoxin was slightly shocked, laughing out loud. Little White is not satisfied. Little Flame is okay, or Little Saint is also okay. When Zhongyuan heard that, he face-palmed, shaking his head and sighing. It has already been 6 days outside of the common people vast habitat within the spiritual ocean. Xuanya was frowning as she looked at the spiritual river that was surging over. Since the two of them entered, 6 days had passed, a full 72 hours. Till date, the two of them still hadn't come out. If it was in the past, if the two of them didn't return in such a long time, it was most probably because they met with misfortune. If they were lucky, they would be saved by the sect elders. If they were unlucky, they would have fallen into the stomachs of those beasts, or their essence blood would have been stolen by evil demons. However, Xuanya was clear that the two of them were still alive and well, and most probably living a good life. Since 4 days ago, there weren't any valuable beasts or evil beings that appeared in this spiritual river. Grade 6 and above were pretty much extinct. It also caused the merit points that their group gained to decrease. However, Xuanya still found it hard to believe. With the strength of the two of them, they were just peak grade 6. How could they block an entire spiritual river? She knew that in that spiritual river, if one wasn't grade 7, one wouldn't be able to survive. If one wanted to be like a fish in water, one would need at least 4 grade 7 experts to work together. Did they hide their strength? Impossible. Her bloodline was special, and she had the spiritual eye ability. All cultivation methods to hide one's strength were unable to hide from her. She knew that the 15-year-old spirit master, although he looked normal, he looked really delicate. The aura around him was also simulated. However, in his body, there was indeed peak return to Sun's soul power. Even his martial path had reached an extremely high realm. Thinking about it for a moment, Xuanya's body suddenly moved, stepping in the air towards the upper reaches of the spiritual river. When Shinro saw that, she was startled. Where is senior sister going? Are you going to the upper reaches of the spiritual river? Xuanya nodded her head slightly. Be it for the safety of the two fellow disciples, or to find the reason why the spiritual river was weird, she needed to go over and take a look. When Yongqin saw that, her lips curled up, saying unconcernedly, Xuanya, you are really going? In my opinion, it was most likely a rank 8 sect senior who saved the two people you mentioned and cleaned up the spirit river while they were at it. So infuriating, what a busybody. The merit points I gained today is less than half of what I gained before. Her tone was filled with hatred, unwillingly waving her sword around, bringing about rings of seven-colored spiritual light. Xuanya broke out into a laugh, but she didn't have any intention to give up. She had thought about this possibility before, but that was definitely the case. As for what happened, she needed to take a look to know. She had a preposterous thought in her heart. Were the two of them the few people who stayed in First Courtyard A, the Tanshio, that junior sister Chenro mentioned? Achoo! On the spell altar, Zhongsho suddenly sneezed out. At this moment, as compared to the haggard state he was in a few days ago, he was pretty much relaxed. He laid at the side of the seven-star spell altar, his back leaning against the railing. He held a book in his hand, reading it carefully. It was the Vairocana Mandala. Great Sun, Saint Virtue Scripture. The current small saint, no. It was Hanshi. It had already split out the August 6th winged Saint Fire Silver Ant. The 6 flying ants turned into 6 streaks of light, along with the lightning winged flood dragon. Even without Hanshi doing anything, they had already locked down this space fisher. All grade 6 beasts and evil demons. As long as they entered, the silver light would wrap around them. In just a blink of an eye, they would be able to end their lives. As for the beast crystals and all valuable materials, there was no need for Zhongsho to personally do it. The Saint Fire Silver Ants would strip them out for him. Only a portion would be burned by the silver-white flames, turning into threads of essence energy, which would be absorbed into its body to replenish what it consumed. Only when it met grade 7 and above would Hanshi attack. Often it would kill with one knife. Zhong Yuan didn't participate at all, only finding a few elite beasts to fight 1 versus 5 to train his spear technique. As for that Rising Moon Lion, it originally wanted to slack off, but Zhongsho kicked it off the spell altar. Helplessly, it could only find an opponent to kill. This fellow was really lazy and didn't go to find those stronger than it. It was just a little weaker, and then it would bully it. Zhongsho was too lazy to bother about it. During these few days, he focused on studying the scriptures he borrowed from the book hiding hall. The most important thing was the Vairocana Mandala in his hands. Flipping open the last page, Zhongsho touched his nose in confusion. Who is thinking about me? That's right. I have been here for 6 days. Ruoshui is still okay, but Chushui is probably really anxious. Speaking of which, it is time to go back. Looking forward, only to see that there was a huge pile of things on the 7-star spell altar. Roughly calculating, there were around 40,000. Not only his Diamond Realm Dari Rulai Heart Curse, but even Zhong Yuan's 10,000 Transformations Mysterious Lightning Heart Sutra was enough to exchange for. Chapter 410. Looking at Hanshi's expression, it seemed like it hated him a lot. Its purple-gold eyes looked over fiercely like it wanted to slay him with one knife. If he continued to order them to fight like this, the tragedy of them rebelling and attacking their master would most likely occur. Zhongsho Xin sighed. In the end, it wasn't as good as his natural protector beast. Compared to Lil Gold, his life pet, it was also much weaker. Although this Saint Fire Silver Ant was good, it couldn't work without any complaints. His mind was connected to the lightning-winged Flood Dragon and Little Gold. The moment such a thought rose up, the two of them sent back begging intense. They seemed to be really tired. Zhongsho was delighted, patiently looking at the last page of the Vairocana Mandala. To achieve the Great Sun Dharma, one must first achieve the Womb Realm, also known as the Original Being, Original Enlightenment, Complete Time. To achieve the wisdom of this theory is the difference. It is the fruit. It is the beginning of enlightenment. It is self-proving. One also needs the Diamond Realm. The reason that is proved by this is also extensive and immeasurable in all the ways of the world. If one shows that one has unlimited wisdom, freeing oneself from the restraints of worries, the Diamond Realm Mandala. Light has no birth and no destruction. Although the sun of the Buddha heart is covered by ignorance, it doesn't decrease. Like the Dharma reality samadhi, it doesn't increase. All laws are the same as the void, leaving all colors, leaving all obstacles. In the truth, one sees oneself as the great sun. Everything one wishes will come true. Zhongsho frowned. This Buddhist scripture was really high level. There were many terms that only the orthodox Buddhist legacy could understand. If he hadn't memorized half of the library in his last life, he would be totally confused. Even at this moment, he only understood half of it. However, his original intention wasn't to fully comprehend it. Just this portion that he understood was enough for him to gain a lot and give rise to numerous inspirations. Womb realm, diamond realm, Dharma reality, samadhi, no birth and destruction. So that's the case. What I was thinking about before was really possible. Taoist spirit master cultivation, the 8th stage was body shaping, and the 9th was true image. However, the cultivation of Buddhist spiritual masters was different. The 8th stage was visualization, while the 9th stage was Dharma manifestation. Zhongsho did not intend to practice any Buddhist techniques. He just wanted to use them as a reference. The foundation would still be Tsang Shengdao's path. But now it's still a little lacking. Let's just hope that the Vajra Region Dari Rulai Heart Mantra is worth 5,000 merit points. Zhongsho smiled as he felt waves of strong resentment assaulting him. He collected all the materials piled up on the altar. Then, with a wave of his hand, he summoned all his spiritual pets back. The thunder-winged flood dragon and little gold returned to his body. The rising moon lion didn't dare to stay in the same place as the 6 flying ants, and could only take a spirit pet bag each. Only Hanshi didn't want to enter the spirit pet bag, no matter what. No matter how much pressure Zhongsho exerted on him, he was still unwilling. Zhongsho had no choice but to let it stay by his side. He raised up the 7-star spell altar once more and headed back. Who knows if it was because he cleaned up too cleanly or because Hanshi was there to threaten him, but on this slow journey back, he actually didn't face any evil demon attacks. However, at a fork in the river, Hanshi's purple gold eyes suddenly looked to the side. Then its 6 pairs of wings flapped, and it flew swiftly in the other direction. Zhongsho's brows rose up, tried to use his spiritual sense to restrain it right away. However, it only caused Hanshi's body to stop in midair. Then, an intent spread out from its spiritual sense. Is there something I need there? Zhongsho's brows rose up. He didn't think much of it. Sometimes even he wasn't sure about what he needed. So how would Hanshi know? Moreover, looking at how it wanted to kill its master, it didn't look like it was loyal to its master. Looking at the situation, there was most probably something it needed there. Just as he instinctively wanted to reject, Hanshi's eyes were filled with anxiousness. A few more intents spread over. You can sense how many spiritual items there are over there. Do I have many of them on my spell altar? It isn't far away. Zhongsho was startled. On this 7-star spell altar, what it used the most was a material known as cloud goldstone. It was a must for anyone below the celestial path to craft spell altars. After thinking for a while, a smile appeared on his face. Forget it. Since it isn't far, then there is no harm in going to take a look. What he wanted wasn't that cloud goldstone spiritual material. If he wanted to get those treasures with his current wealth, as long as it was something within the cloud world, he could buy anything he wanted. What he was really curious about was Hanshi's ability to sense spiritual items from far away. He wanted to take a look at whether or not Hanshi really had such an ability. Speaking of which, the demon fire crystal ant did have such an ability. It was able to search underground for various ores and living beings as its food. He slapped the spiritual pet bag by his waist and released those 6 8-winged flying ants. Since the Saint Fire Ant Queen wanted to go, then it was expected that they would be in charge of opening the path. With the speed of the 7-star spell altar, he followed another fork and flew downstream. With 7 grade 7 Saint Fire Silver ants protecting them, there weren't any blind beasts or evil demons who would come to find trouble with them in this spiritual river branch. However, when an hour passed, Zhongsho noticed that he had fallen for Hanchi's trap. How was this the not far that it mentioned in its intent? A full hour. In the outside world, with the speed of his 7-star spell altar, he could fly a full 100 miles. If they continued forwards, they would reach the world abyss, a place connected to tens of worlds. Slightly hesitating for a moment, Zhongsho still urged the spell altar to continue forwards. Although that place was dangerous, as long as he didn't go too deep in, he would be able to retreat safely. Even if he didn't rely on these 7 Saint Fire Silver Ants, he would still be able to escape. As expected, a moment later, it was a vast area in front of his eyes. This was an extremely huge void. The spiritual energy was also like a flood. However, the density was just a little thinner than that of the Spirit River. It was also a crack between tens of worlds. However, this place was especially huge. One couldn't see the end of it. He could vaguely see countless bright spots of light around him, as if they were stars. There were also numerous clouds and thick mist covering within. The colors were either plain or bright. Zhong Yuan's pupils constricted. This was the first time he had seen such a magical and beautiful scene. Zhongsho was also slightly distracted. However, most of his attention was on his 5th protector beast from start to finish. After Hanchi entered this place, it first looked around and then charged down. This time it wasn't far away, only to see a mountain-like giant object floating in the void. It had a length and width of 12,000 to 30,000 feet and looked like a huge island. Along with the spiritual wave, it slowly moved into the distance. This is the corpse of the gold-swallowing beast during the Cloud Desolate era, in Zhongsho's memory. This was a terrifying beast that could be compared to another terrifying beast during the Cloud Desolate era, the sandworm. It was said that it could swallow anything. Not only did it swallow metal, its body was huge, and its body was extremely tough, like that of fine iron. Although it wasn't a god beast, most of the time, when same great god beasts met it, they would avoid it. He was originally finding it weird that this world abyss was within the space crack, so there shouldn't be cloud goldstones. Looking at the giant corpse of the gold-swallowing beast, his doubts were cleared. If this beast had swallowed some cloud goldstones when it was alive, then it wasn't anything surprising. When Hanchi charged close, there were hundreds of different-looking beasts that surged out. Most of them were fire element bird types, ranging from grade 6 to grade 7. Like they were protesting against Hanchi for trespassing on their territory, they roared at Hanchi and him. However, Hanchi ignored him and continued to ram its head into him. The grade 7 fire crane, which seemed to be the king of all birds, couldn't take it anymore and charged up. The 3 blazing red lines of fire merged into one and charged towards the flying ants. Tens of thousands of fiery feathers instantly filled this small space. Zhongsho shook his head slightly when he saw this. If it was just that, they wouldn't be able to take a single blow from his spiritual pet. As expected, the white flames on the 7 flying ants became even more intense. Only a few of the 7 silvery white shadows flickered within the crimson flames. Just like that, these 3 grade 7 fire cranes were all beheaded with one knife. Their movement speed was so quick that it exceeded the limits of Samurai's strength. One could only see a series of white afterimages appearing and disappearing. The moment these 3 fire cranes died, what followed was a massacre. Tens of fire element birds were killed one by Hanchi and its descendants. All the grade 7 giant birds were pretty much instantly beheaded. The other birds finally realized that they weren't the opponents of these few flying ants, fleeing in panic. Hanchi didn't bother, directly charging into a hole in the corpse of the gold-swallowing beast. Zhongsho controlled the 7-star spell Alter and charged in. Who knows whether or not this was the digestive tract of the gold-swallowing beast. Anyways, it was really wide. All around were various defensive measures. There were grade 8 mind stones, golden lightning stones used to craft lightning element weapons. Naturally, there were also many cloud gold stones. This was just the surface of the cave. Who knows how many similar treasures there were within the entire corpse of the gold-swallowing beast. Zhong Shaxin was stunned for a moment. At this moment, he really wanted to carry it on his body. It would be best if he could bring a high-grade storage treasure to move the entire corpse of the gold-swallowing beast into it. This place was no different from a treasure trove. Naturally, such a thought was just a thought. Even if he had a space-type storage treasure, he didn't have enough strength to move this 100,000 feet long gold-swallowing beast corpse into his storage space. In the future, when he had enough strength to collect it, he wouldn't care about these riches anymore. He could only sigh, taking out all the valuable spiritual items he saw along the way and placing them into his heaven and earth bag. Chapter 411. Following the tunnel, they collected all sorts of mind stones and materials worth close to 10 million grade 4 beast crystals. Zhongsho was too busy, so he asked Zhong Yuan to help him summon the lightning-winged flood dragon. Little Gold on his arm gave out excited cries. There were many ores here that it hadn't swallowed before. Hanshi in front didn't have any intentions of stopping, like it didn't care about the things here at all. However, the more they flew in, the more Zhongsho felt weird. Within the cave, the left and right walls had signs of being burnt and turning into sand. After the metal-swallowing beast died, the stone that its corpse turned into could be considered a grade 6 and above stone material. To be able to melt it, what kind of shocking temperature did it have? The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. However, there wasn't any strong aura here. The birds that were resting here were mostly chased away by Hanshi. In just a few breaths, the 7-star spell Alter entered a slightly wider space. This was a roughly 3,000 feet wide cave. The spiritual materials and ores here were much more abundant than before. On the cave walls, numerous glows flashed. Zhongsho just took a look at the shape of this place and knew that this place was the stomach of the metal-swallowing beast. On one side, he ordered Zhong Yuan and the lightning-winged flood dragon to each hold a small heaven and earth bag to collect. Zhongsho looked around warily, only to see that after Hanshi charged in, it didn't bother about anything else. It charged to the side of the cave, grabbing black crystals with some silver threads and throwing them in front of Zhongsho. Its purple-gold eyes were filled with a begging expression. Zhong Shaxin understood that this was what the few mutated silver ants craved. This was also the reason why Hanshi wanted to rush over here. Waving his sleeves, he kept all these things into his bag. There were a total of hundreds of them, but they were all really heavy. They were still within the heaven and earth bag, forming its own space so it could still take it. After knowing the reason, Zhongsho didn't care too much. In the next moment, his gaze was attracted by a ball of flame not far away. When he got closer, he realized that there were piles of fire obsidian stones here. They were spread out over 20 feet. They were originally fire attribute spirit treasures, so when thousands of them were piled up together, they ignited into a crimson flame out of nowhere. At the side, there were some corpses of elite beasts. Taking a rough look, they were all fire type. There were also hundreds of beast crystals, most of which were grade 7. But among them, there were also quite a number of tier 8. Zhongsho's eyelids involuntarily twitched. The ominous feeling in his heart grew even stronger. Looking at the ball of flames, there were a few scarlet fire eggs that were about a foot in size. Zhongsho reached out with his hand, not caring about the scorching heat as he grabbed one of them. When he probed with his spiritual sense, his pupils shrank slightly. Rank 6, Phoenix Blood, although he didn't know what kind of beast was inside, it definitely had the purest fire Phoenix bloodline. Zhongsho was first shocked, following which he felt slightly regretful. A grade 6 Phoenix blood-flying beast value was no less than his lightning-winged flood dragon. However, these Phoenix eggs were destined to have no fate with him. He already had 5 protector beasts beside him, and his soul power was limited. He couldn't control more. To be able to maintain 5 spirit contracts at the same time was already a sign of talent. It was also because he only had 1 soul beast, and the lightning-winged flood dragon was a natural protector beast. Little Gold and Hanshi were also natural protector beasts, so he didn't need to consume too much energy. Although this phoenix blood-flying beast was good, its use overlapped with Hanshi's. Be its movement speed or the Saint Fire ability, it was destined to kill numerous natural variants. In the future, it wouldn't be any weaker than a true fire phoenix. It could also split and reproduce, controlling descendants half a grade lower to fight. Unless he was determined to kill Hanshi, otherwise, this fire phoenix would be useless to him. Before stepping onto the celestial path, he wasn't prepared to take in too many protector beasts. Now he had more than enough offense and not enough defense. The defensive power of a demonic eye silver bear was simply too weak. He had to be really careful about the last spot. He wanted to use this fire phoenix blood to replace the silver and Hanshi's purple gold eyes were filled with killing intent as it looked at the few phoenix eggs. A moment later, the fierce glow faded. Zhongsho scoffed coldly, too lazy to bother. He quickly put the 4 eggs of the fire phoenix into the spirit pet bag, following which he also took all the beast crystals and those fire obsidian stones. Beneath the phoenix eggs was a thick layer of feathers, which were also good stuff, following which he kept the 7-star spell altar and said to Zhong Yuan, "Let's go." The latter understood, not bothering about the other ores, and instantly flying through the air. Along with Zhongsho having a thought, the lightning-winged flood dragon not far away shrank back. It allowed Zhongsho and Zhong Yuan to each grab one of its dragon horns, following which a lightning glow exploded out as it flew out of the cave, close to lightning speed as it flew towards where it came from. It didn't stop at all, the 7 flying ants charging at the front. With Hanshi leading the way, it killed all the beasts in front of it. Less than 10 minutes after the 2 of them and 1 beast charged into the spirit river, a shrill cry came from behind. An incomparably mournful cry came from behind as a vast flame energy chased after them. It was several times faster than the lightning-winged flood dragon, causing the temperature within to crazily rise. Zhongsho sighed, thinking to himself that it was as expected. Weren't the hundreds of fire element birds beside the metal-swallowing beast corpse, the 100 birds facing the phoenix? Those hundreds of birds were protecting the phoenix blood descendants. As for those beast crystals, they should be food prepared for the baby phoenix that hadn't hatched yet. To be able to give birth to a grade 6 phoenix egg, it would at least have celestial realm strength. However, it was impossible for him to return the phoenix egg to her. At that time, he knew that since he entered the phoenix nest, he was tainted by the aura within. That high-grade elite beast with pure phoenix blood definitely wouldn't let them go. Why not just sweep everything inside clean? After charging forward for about 200 breaths of time, the tyrannical spiritual pressure from behind also pierced through the air. Zhongsho only felt his limbs go soft, pretty much without any strength in his body. Within his soul, it felt like it was about to tear apart. Luckily, this lightning-winged flood dragon also had pure, true dragon bloodline and wasn't willing to admit defeat. Although blood seeped out from the scales on its body, it was extremely painful. It was like all its potential had been ignited, its speed increasing by 30%. Zhongsho's brows furrowed, silently taking out an energy-destroying spirit upheaval talisman from his heaven and earth bag. It was also at this moment that a loud rumble came from behind him. All of a sudden, a series of spirit inscriptions appeared in the air. Turning around and looking out, he saw 100 feet wide red fire golden phoenix smashing into an invisible barrier. That huge force directly smashed the barrier into pieces. However, his swift charge was stopped and his speed slowed down. It also caused the entire space to shake. The originally stable space barrier started to shake, numerous black patterns flashing. Zhongsho's expression relaxed, keeping the talisman once more. As expected, the reason why grade 7 and above beasts and evil demons were unable to enter this spiritual river was because of the spiritual formation that Song Shengdao laid out. It wasn't because of the repulsive force of the cloud world itself. After advancing for roughly 200 breaths, pretty much every short distance, the red fire golden phoenix would smash into an invisible barrier. The distance between the two sides was pulled further and further apart. The red fire golden phoenix behind was slowly unable to continue. Only when they were at least 100 breaths apart did the lightning-winged flood dragon use up all its strength and slowly stop. Zhong Shou and Zhong Yuan both looked behind them with fear in their hearts. If he had been just a little slower, he would have died. They would have fallen to the hands of the red fire golden phoenix. This time, it could be said to be extremely dangerous. Making use of the time, Zhong Shou hurriedly consumed a few pills, not forgetting about the few flying ants in front of him. Then he saw that the red fire golden phoenix that had stopped looking over with a venomous gaze. Suddenly, there was a sharp cry that didn't stop for a long time. Just as Zhong Shou was panting and didn't understand what was going on, he saw numerous grade 7 bird-type beasts flying over. These birds weren't stopped by the spiritual formation, like a red flood as they surged towards the two of them. Zhong Shou's face was instantly filled with shock. Pretty much at the same time, Xuanye, who was carefully walking within the spiritual river, also looked around in shock. The entire space was shaking, and countless space-time cracks were appearing and disappearing in the surroundings. Just as Xuanye was filled with shock and doubt, Xuanye was stunned. A rumbling sound, accompanied by a shrill cry, suddenly reached his ears. This is a phoenix cry? Not only was it a phoenix cry, but it was the purest kind with the purest bloodline. What happened in front of them? Were those two people still alive? Common people's vast habitat, book hiding building B. Han Fong, who was smiling as he looked at Shi Rulin practicing the fist technique, was also startled, his face filled with surprise. Weird. Why would a celestial realm expert break the boundary? Slightly waving his hand, and a spiritual mirror appeared in front of him, like it was shining through the void. An image suddenly appeared in front of him. When he looked at Zhong Shou, Han Fong was shocked once more. It's that kid. What evil things did that fellow do to make this fire phoenix look like it has a huge hatred with him? He shook his head, slightly not understanding. However, in the next instance, his eyes were attracted by a few silver-white bodies. Their speed was so fast that even his mirror could only capture their afterimages. In the end, his eyes were fixed on a human-shaped body. This is a heaven and earth variant. Han Fong clenched his fists and stood up. Shi Rulin, who was concentrating on practicing her fists, was also shocked. Han Fong's face was alternating between red and white, changing constantly. Suddenly surprised, suddenly worried. These 6 flying ants come from the same source as it. They should be its descendants. Is junior brother Zhong really someone from Artsang Xingdao? Heaven and earth variant, born from killing tribulation and vengeful energy. If Artsang Xingdao had such a beast, Senior Master Shizi wouldn't have died. Chapter 412. Behind the countless 7th-grade fiery birds, the crimson fire golden phoenix was also blazing with flames, burning the spiritual runes in front of it to the point that they were almost burnt out. It smashed into it once more, totally smashing it into pieces. It didn't stop there as it pounced over. Zhong Shouxin's heart sank slightly. Luckily, his lightning-winged flood dragon had already recovered some strength after consuming a few pills. It once again rode the lightning and fled forwards. In just 100 breaths, he heard numerous thunder like explosions behind him, like they were getting closer and closer. Out of those grade 7 flying beasts, there were some that were quick and were slowly catching up. Hanchi led a few flying ants and turned around in time, slashing out from behind. For sharp long sabers slashed out beautiful saber shadows from time to time. It was like they weren't affected by the suppression of the fire phoenix as they engaged in an intense battle with those grade 7 firebirds. Pretty much every few breaths, there would be a grade 7 firebird that was slain by those blade arms. It also caused a red fire golden phoenix to crazily cry out once more. The sharp sound waves nearly shattered one's eardrums and struck the depths of one's soul. Zhong Shou's consciousness was pretty much totally dizzy. Pretty much instinctively, he went all out to grab the horn of the lightning-winged flood dragon that hadn't formed yet to prevent himself from being tossed down. Only after a few hundred breaths did he slowly calm down. The red fire golden phoenix behind had already disappeared. It was probably thrown off or totally blocked by Tsang Shengdao's spiritual formation. The red tide of flames behind them had also been pulled apart by quite a distance. As for those few flying ants, apart from Hanshi, they were all extremely tired. Their bodies shook like they were about to fall at any moment. Zhongsho waved his sleeves and kept these few flying ants into his spiritual pet bag to cultivate. His spiritual sense could clearly sense the exhaustion of the lightning-winged flood dragon. If it flew normally, it would be fine for 3 days and 3 nights. However, just now it had exploded out its life essence energy. Even if this lightning-winged flood dragon had thick true dragon bloodline, it was still unable to take it. Consolingly patting the head of the flood dragon, Zhongsho sent a spiritual sense over. He indicated that they would be able to stop and rest soon. Then, a figure suddenly jumped into his field of vision. His mouth was wide open as he stared blankly at the red bird wave in front of him. His heroic face was filled with despair. "It's Xianyi." Zhongsho was slightly startled. What was this woman doing here? Without much thought, he threw his fire-een sword over. "What are you waiting for? Come on up." The fire-een sword was activated by his soul power, and its speed was several times faster than the thunder-winged flood dragon. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of Xianyi. The latter reacted in an instant. She immediately grabbed onto the sword hilt, allowing the fire-een sword to bring her forward at a high speed, until the sword light turned and brought her to the back of the thunder-winged flood dragon. She stood still again. Only then did Xuanya's green face relax. Then, she looked behind in shock. "Junior brother, what was going on? How could there be so many 7th-order flying beasts? I don't remember there being a beast wave in the Spirit River." Without the mental suppression of the Fire Phoenix, Zhongsho had totally calmed down. He just needed to grab the dragon horn with one hand to stabilize himself and not be afraid of falling. After hearing that, he smiled, taking out the token and waving it in front of Xuanya. "It's not junior brother, it's great senior master." Xuanya's eyes focused as she looked over carefully. As expected, it was Tsang Xingdao's 3rd-generation core disciple Tanxio's name. Her heart shook, thinking that this person was the Tanxio that Chun Ro mentioned. He was indeed a 3rd-generation core disciple. Looking at Zhongsho's smiling face, she couldn't help but curse out. The seniority in the sect was really messy. Most of them were 8th-generation disciples like her. There were also 6th and 7th-generation disciples. There were even 6th-generation disciples. However, most of them who were similar in age would call each other sisters and brothers in informal situations. Who would be like this guy, showing off with the identity of a 3rd-generation disciple? However, he had no choice but to be respectful. He could only helplessly bow deeply towards Zhongsho and say, "Disciple Xianyi greets great martial granduncle." Fortunately, she was strong and had reached the 7th stage of the martial path. Standing on the thunder-winged flood dragon, it was as if his feet were rooted to the ground. Only by not being afraid of falling would he be able to properly perform this etiquette. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a beautiful silver-white humanoid creature slay a 7th-grade fiery bird that was chasing after it. Then, the 6 pairs of transparent wings flapped, and he was not far away from Zhongsho. Xuanya's pupils constricted once more. What a fast saber, what a fast escape speed. She seemed to have realized something. Her face turned ashen white. This person was only a 6th-level spirit master, but he already had 2 7th-level protector beasts. This thunder-winged flood dragon was not far from transforming into a dragon. Who knows, maybe when it tried to break through to the 8th stage, it would be able to do that. As for this unknown humanoid beast, although she didn't know where it came from, one could see how it was able to instantly kill people of the same grade. It was twice as fast as the Thunderwing Flood Dragon. Even those 8th-level existences would be able to go up against it. Who knows where this person got so much soul power from to maintain the spirit contracts of these two 7th-level beasts at the same time. However, with such strength, he did have the right to become Tsang Shengdao's 3rd-generation core disciple and move into the first courtyard A. At this moment, Xuanye was more and more curious. Just now, this person only said his identity and didn't reply to her question. Zhongshu didn't have any intentions to hide, casually grabbing a phoenix egg from his heaven and earth bag and tossing it in his hand. His face was filled with shock. It wasn't much, I just stole a few eggs, and that red fire golden phoenix went crazy. The moment the egg appeared, it caused a cry to spread out from the distance. It was too far away. Although it didn't have much strength, it was filled with endless hatred. That red flame wave seemed to be forced by some power, its speed increasing by a little. Zhongshu was helpless. He didn't have any intentions of taking advantage of it. If he knew that it would be so dangerous, he would rather not go. Red fire golden phoenix? Xuanye's heart jumped. Looking closely for a moment, she could feel that the aura within was no weaker than a 6th-level beast. 6th-level phoenix egg, the purity of its bloodline, it wasn't far from a true god-beast fire phoenix. Hearing the phoenix cry, that red fire golden phoenix's strength was at least above celestial realm. She only felt speechless, thinking to herself that no wonder there were so many 7th-level beasts. Phoenixes were the king of all birds and did have the ability to command other flying beasts. Speaking of which, not long later in the hands of Tan Xiao, there would be another strong protector beast, although she didn't know what its spiritual cultivation standards were like. However, just these few protector beasts were already invincible within the sect. Envy flashed in her eyes. Her expression turned solemn once more as she cupped her fists. Xuanye won't tell anyone about this matter. If I go against my oath, I will be destroyed by the heavens and earth. Zhongshu was delighted when he heard that. Was this Xuanye really a Taiyuan sect disciple? That junior nephew of Shui Lingbo? It seemed like he was from Hao Xuan's sect. He had no intention of hiding this matter. A few phoenix eggs were actually not that great of a thing, apart from 2 of them being used by the people around him. As for the rest, if he wanted to sell or exchange, he wouldn't be able to hide it from people who wanted it. Why not be open from the start? Within this common people's path vast habitat, if he didn't use his strength to suppress others, who would dare to offend him? The lightning-winged flood dragon's speed became slower and slower. It was obvious that its strength was running out. Zhongshu decided to pat the head of the flood dragon, causing it to stop. Turning around, he faced the crazily surging red wave. Xuanye's brows furrowed, not knowing why Zhongshu stopped. Even without the winged flood dragon, he could still drive the sword. The bird wave behind would at most take 70 breaths to catch up. Taking in a deep breath, Xuanye resisted the urge to flee alone and stayed behind. However, Zongyuan knew that his ruler definitely had his reasons for doing so. He didn't say a word as he stood beside Zhongshu. Zhongshu was really calm, quietly waiting, until the closest grade 7 bird was 50 breaths away. Only then did he slap out the 3 golden talismans. At the start, Xuanye didn't care, thinking that these 2 golden talismans were just grade 7. Could they block this vast grade 7 bird wave? She already had the intention to step into the void and bring the 2 of them to flee. Luckily, this Tan Xiao seemed to have come to his senses. After he sent out the golden talismans, he continuously retreated. He was also afraid that they would catch up, using a series of protection talismans to buff the bodies of several people. Occasionally, he would turn around and take a look, only to see the talismans float. A moment later, they were 30 breaths away. They were less than 100 feet away from the bird wave. The spiritual patterns on the golden talismans also started to shine. At this moment, Xuanye took in a deep cold breath. Energy-destroying spirit upheaval talisman. Suddenly, she understood what Zhongshu meant. If this grade 7 energy-destroying spirit upheaval talisman was anywhere else, it would at most prevent other spirit masters from using heaven and earth spiritual energy to cast spells. However, In this zero wave, it wasn't a true killing weapon. Along with the 3 golden talismans burning, the spiritual energy in the surrounding small region started to become chaotic, following which it exploded. The heaven and earth spiritual energy that was so thick that it formed into a physical form crazily exploded. In the blink of an eye, the seemingly vast and mighty flock of birds were completely submerged within it, following which the surrounding space barrier started to shake. Countless black lines flickered within the spirit river. Even Zhongsho and the others who were extremely far away were affected. The astral wind and spiritual explosion were still okay. When it reached them, they were already at the end of their rope. Only space-time rifts would appear from time to time. Even the strongest body-protecting techniques were unable to block it. Luckily, Zhongsho was prepared. In the last life, he was experienced in dealing with these space cracks. Occasionally, he would pull the 2 people beside him to change positions. Although his body was injured, at least he didn't break his limbs. Once the space crack disappeared completely, the space crack disappeared. When the spiritual explosion finally calmed down, the 3 of them were in a bad state. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.